My son sent me a bottle of whiskey for my 70th birthday. A Macallan 25. Beautiful amber liquid in a crystal decanter, the kind of gift that screams luxury and affection. Except for one small detail. My son knows I haven't touched a drop of alcohol in 10 years because of my heart condition. He knows that with the cocktail of medications I take daily, one stiff drink could stop my heart cold. I didn't drink it. Instead, I did something I thought was kind. I rewrapped it and sent it to his father-in-law, Robert. The next day, when my son called and asked if I enjoyed the first glass, I told him the truth. I told him I gave it away. The silence on the other end of the phone wasn't just awkward. It was terrified. That was the moment I realized my son hadn't sent me a gift. He had sent me an executioner. Before I tell you how a bottle of whiskey started a war in my family, please like and subscribe if you have ever had to watch your back around the people who are supposed to have your back. Let me know in the comments where you are listening from. My name is Otis King, and I have lived in the south side of Chicago for all of my 70 years. I built my life with these two hands, first as a laborer, then as a building inspector for the city. I spent 40 years looking for cracks in foundations, spotting the rot behind fresh paint, and telling people the hard truths they didn't want to hear. You develop a sixth sense for structural failure in this line of work. You learn that just because a house looks sturdy on the outside doesn't mean it isn't crumbling on the inside. I should have applied that same inspection to my own family, but love has a way of blinding even the sharpest eyes. Last Tuesday was my birthday, 70 years old, a milestone they call it. You would expect a party, or at least a dinner with family. But my house was silent. It is a large Victorian home I bought for cash back in the 90s when everyone else was fleeing the neighborhood. I restored it myself, stripping the woodwork, relaying the floors. It is worth a fortune now, but to me it is just a quiet place full of memories of my late wife, Sarah. She passed 5 years ago, and since then the silence has gotten louder. I sat in my leather armchair by the window, watching the gray Chicago sky threaten snow. The phone hadn't rung all morning. My son Marcus hadn't called. My daughter-in-law Tiffany certainly hadn't called. I was just an old man in a big house waiting for the day to end. Then around 2 in the afternoon, a delivery truck pulled up. A young man in a brown uniform jogged up my steps with a heavy package. I signed for it, feeling a flicker of hope. Maybe they hadn't forgotten. Maybe Marcus was just busy with his big city life and sent something ahead of a visit. I carried the box into the kitchen. It was heavy, wrapped in expensive paper. I cut the tape with my pocket knife, the one I have carried since 1980. Inside, nestled in black satin, was a bottle of Macallan 25-year-old Sherry Oak. I know the brand. I used to drink it back in the day before the heart attack that nearly put me in the ground 10 years ago. It is a $2,000 bottle of whiskey, a king's drink. I stared at it, and the hope in my chest turned into something cold and hard. Marcus knows. He was there in the hospital waiting room 10 years ago when the doctor told me, "Mr. King, your drinking days are over. If you mix alcohol with these beta blockers and blood thinners, you will not wake up." Marcus stood right there. He nodded. He emptied my liquor cabinet himself the day I came home. "So why send me this?" I pulled the bottle out. It was heavy, cold glass. There was a card tucked underneath. I opened it. "Happy birthday, Dad. Have a drink on me. Celebrate the big 7-0. Love, Marcus. Have a drink on me." I sat down at the kitchen table, the bottle standing there like an accusation. Was he just thoughtless? Marcus had always been a bit scattered, chasing get-rich-quick schemes, trying to impress his wife's high-society friends. Maybe he just forgot. Maybe he thought a $2,000 gift would make up for not visiting me for 6 months. Or maybe it was a test. Maybe he wanted to see if the old man would slip up. I looked at the amber liquid. It looked delicious. It looked like warmth on a cold day. For a second, just a split second, I was tempted. One glass. Just one glass to celebrate surviving 70 years in this tough world. What could it hurt? But then my inspector's instinct kicked in. The structural engineer in my brain whispered, "Look closer." Why now? Why this specific gift? Marcus knew I was strict about my health. I walked 5 miles a day. I ate clean. I wanted to live to see my grandchildren if Tiffany ever decided to have any. Sending me poison wrapped in luxury felt like a slap in the face. It felt like he didn't care if I lived or died, as long as he could say he sent an expensive gift. I felt the anger rising hot and bitter. I wanted to smash the bottle against the wall. I wanted to call him and scream. But I am not a man who wastes things. $2,000 is $2,000. I grew up in a time when you didn't throw away food, let alone a fortune in liquor. Then I thought of Robert. Robert is Tiffany's father, my son's father-in-law. He lives in a condo downtown about 20 minutes from here. Robert is a good man, quiet, a retired accountant who suffers under the thumb of his daughter just as much as Marcus does. Tiffany runs that family like a dictator. Robert's only escape, I knew, was his evening scotch. He loved fine whiskey. He could talk for hours about peat and oak barrels. A smile touched my lips. If I couldn't enjoy this, Robert certainly would. It would be a nice gesture, a way to turn my son's thoughtlessness into something good. Plus, it would save me from having to buy Robert a Christmas gift next month. 2 birds, 1 stone. I put the bottle back in the box. I smoothed out the black satin. I taped it back up carefully so it looked untouched. I picked up the phone and called a local courier service I used for my rental properties. I need a package delivered to the downtown Marina Towers, I told the dispatcher. Yes, today. Priority. While I waited for the courier, I wrote a new note. Robert Marcus sent this to me, but you know I can't touch the stuff. No sense in letting good liquor gather dust. Enjoy it for both of us. Happy early Christmas. Otis. I taped the note to the outside of the box. When the courier arrived, a different guy this time, older, looking tired, I handed him the box. Handle it with care, I said. It is worth more than my car. He laughed. You got it, Mr. King. I watched the van drive away down the tree-lined street of my quiet neighborhood. I felt a sense of satisfaction. I had taken the high road. I hadn't caused a scene with Marcus. I hadn't thrown a tantrum. I had simply redirected the energy. I went back to my armchair by the window. The house was still quiet. The snow had started to fall, dusting the porch railing with white. I made myself a cup of tea, Earl Grey, hot and strong. This was my celebration. Quiet, dignified, sober. I didn't know it then, watching the snow fall, but that courier van wasn't just carrying a bottle of whiskey. It was carrying a bomb, and I had just unknowingly detonated it in the wrong house. The rest of the evening passed without incident. I cooked myself a steak, watched an old Western movie, and went to bed early. I slept soundly, the sleep of a man with a clear conscience. The next morning, my phone rang at 9 sharp. I saw Marcus's name on the caller ID. I let it ring twice before picking up. I didn't want him to think I was sitting by the phone waiting for him. Hello, son, I said, keeping my voice even. Hey, Dad, happy birthday for yesterday. Thank you, Marcus. There was a pause. I could hear him breathing on the other end. It sounded fast, shallow. Maybe he was jogging, or maybe he was nervous. Did you get the package, he asked. I did, I said. It arrived yesterday afternoon. And did you open it? I did. Macallan 25. That is a serious bottle of whiskey, Marcus. Yeah, well, you deserve the best. Dad, I wanted to get you something special. I waited. I wanted to see if he would mention my heart. If he would say, I know you can't drink it, but keep it for guests. Or just have a sip. But he didn't. He pushed. So he said, his voice dropping a little. How was it? How was what? The whiskey. Did you try it? Did you have a glass last night? I frowned at the phone. He was pushing too hard. Marcus never cared about the quality of whiskey. He drank cheap beer and vodka. Why was he so interested in the taste notes of a single malt? It was smooth, I said, testing him. Good, he said. That's good. Did you drink a lot? You know to celebrate. I felt a chill go down my spine. He wasn't asking if I enjoyed it. He was asking if I had consumed it. He was asking if the substance was inside my body. Actually, Marcus, I said, leaning back in my kitchen chair, I didn't drink any of it. The silence on the line was instant. Heavy. You didn't? No. You know I can't drink, son. My heart meds. Dr. Wallace would skin me alive, and frankly, I like being alive. I heard him let out a breath. It sounded like frustration, or panic. Oh. Right. Yeah. Of course. So what did you do with it? Is it still there? No, I said casually. I didn't want it tempting me in the house. You know how it is. So I re-gifted it. You what? His voice shot up an octave. I gave it away, Marcus. I sent it over to Robert. Robert. Which Robert? Your father-in-law. Robert. Tiffany's dad. I know he loves a good scotch. I sent it over by courier yesterday afternoon. He probably opened it last night watching the game. The sound that came out of my son's mouth next is something I will never forget. It wasn't a word. It was a strangled noise like an animal caught in a trap. "You gave it to Robert," he shouted. His voice cracked. "Yes. Why are you shouting? It is a nice gift. He will appreciate it more than I." "Dad, you have to call him," Marcus screamed. "Call him right now. Tell him not to drink it." "Why? It is just whiskey." "Marcus, what is wrong with you? Just call him." "No, wait, I will call him. You didn't open the seal, did you? You didn't touch it. I told you I sent it right over." "Marcus, what is going on?" He hung up. The line went dead. I sat there holding the receiver, staring at the wall. My heart started to beat a little faster, and not because of any whiskey. I have been a building inspector for 40 years. I know when a structure is about to collapse. I know the sound of a load-bearing wall giving way. And that panic in my son's voice, that was the sound of a roof caving in. I stood up. I didn't call Robert. I grabbed my keys and my coat. I needed to see this for myself. I walked out to my truck, my old Ford F-150 that I keep running better than any new car on the lot. I drove toward downtown, toward Robert's condo. Something was wrong. Terribly wrong. As I turned onto the main avenue leading to the marina, I heard them. Sirens. Not one but two. Screaming down the street, weaving through traffic. An ambulance and a police cruiser. My stomach dropped. I pressed the accelerator. I followed the lights. I watched as they turned into the entrance of the Marina Towers. Robert's building. I pulled up to the curb, ignoring the doorman waving me away. I jumped out of the truck. I saw the paramedics rushing through the glass doors with a stretcher. I ran. I am 70, but I can still move when I have to. I got to the lobby just as the elevator doors opened. They were wheeling a man out. He was strapped down, an oxygen mask over his face. His body was jerking, convulsing in a rhythm that looked unnatural, terrifying. It was Robert. His eyes were rolled back in his head. Foam was gathering at the corners of his mouth. "Robert!" I shouted. A paramedic pushed me back. "Sir, stay back." "What happened?" I asked, grabbing the man's arm. "I am family." "What happened to him? Possible overdose or poisoning?" the paramedics shouted as they ran toward the ambulance. He was found unconscious on the floor. Poisoning. The word hung in the cold morning air like smoke. I stood on the sidewalk watching the ambulance doors slam shut. I watched it speed away, lights flashing red and blue against the gray sky. And then I saw it. A car screeching into the driveway. A black Mercedes. My son's car. Marcus jumped out looking wild-eyed, his hair disheveled. Tiffany was with him, but she didn't look worried. She looked angry. She was typing furiously on her phone. They didn't see me standing by the pillar. They ran toward the doorman. My father, Tiffany, yelled, "Is he okay? Did he drink it?" I stepped out from the shadows. "He is on his way to the ICU." "Tiffany," I said. They both spun around. Marcus looked at me and his face was the color of old ash. He looked like a ghost. But Tiffany looked at me with cold, hard calculation. "You," she hissed. "This is your fault. My fault." I asked, my voice low and dangerous. "You were supposed to drink it," she whispered, almost too low to hear. And in that moment, the final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. The structural failure was complete. The foundation wasn't just cracked, it was rotten. I looked at my son, the boy I had raised, the boy I had taught to ride a bike and throw a baseball. He couldn't meet my eyes. He was shaking. I didn't say another word. I turned around and walked back to my truck. I had work to do. My son hadn't sent me a birthday gift. He had sent me a death sentence. And now I was going to find out exactly why. The morning sun hit my kitchen table at a sharp angle, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. It was the kind of quiet Wednesday morning that usually brought me peace. I sat there with my pill organizer, the plastic one with the days of the week printed on the lids. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, click, click, click. I popped the beta blocker and the blood thinner, washing them down with lukewarm water. This was my ritual. This was the price of staying alive at 70. My heart was a ticking clock that needed constant maintenance, a fact my son Marcus knew better than anyone. He had been the one to drive me to the ER 10 years ago. He had been the one to hold my hand while I gasped for air, swearing to God he would do anything if I just pulled through. I looked at the empty spot on the counter where the Macallan 25 had sat yesterday. I felt a twinge of satisfaction thinking about Robert enjoying it. Robert was a good man, a quiet soul who had been beaten down by life and by his daughter, my daughter-in-law, Tiffany. He deserved a win. He deserved to sip something expensive and feel like a king for an evening. I imagined him sitting in his recliner watching the Bulls game, raising that crystal glass. It made me smile. Then the phone rang. It was 9:15 in the morning. I looked at the caller ID. Marcus. I felt a surge of fatherly warmth mixed with a little irritation. Now he calls. Not on my birthday, but the day after. Maybe he was calling to apologize. Maybe guilt had finally gotten the better of him. I cleared my throat, wiped the crumb of toast from my lip, and picked up the receiver. "Good morning, son," I said, keeping my voice steady. I wasn't going to make it easy for him, but I wasn't going to start a fight either. "Hey, Dad." His voice was tight, strained. It didn't sound like a man calling to wish his father a belated happy birthday. It sounded like a man who was standing on a ledge. "Did you get the package?" he asked. "No pleasantries. No, how are you? Just straight to the business." "I did," I said, leaning back in my chair. "It arrived yesterday afternoon. And what, Marcus? Did you open it?" I frowned at the phone. There was a tremor in his voice, a high-pitched frequency that I hadn't heard since he was a teenager trying to lie about crashing my car. "I did," I said slowly. "Macallan 25. That is a serious bottle of whiskey, Marcus. $2,000 serious. Yeah, well, you deserve the best, Dad. I wanted to get you something special." He was talking too fast. The words were tumbling out of him, tripping over each other. So he continued, and I could hear him taking a breath, a sharp intake of air. "How was it?" "How was what?" "The whiskey. Did you try it? Did you have a glass last night?" I stared at the phone. This wasn't right. Marcus knew about my heart. He knew about the meds. He knew Dr. Wallace had strictly forbidden alcohol. Why was he pushing this? Why was he so desperate to know if I had consumed it? It was smooth, I said, deciding to test him. I wanted to see where this was going. "Good," he said, and the relief in his voice was palpable. "It was disgusting. That is good. Did you drink a lot? You know to celebrate. Did you finish a glass?" I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach. He wasn't asking if I enjoyed the flavor. He was asking about the dosage. He wanted to know how much of the liquid was currently inside my system. My inspector's instinct, the one that had kept me alive on dangerous construction sites for 40 years, started screaming. Danger. Structural failure imminent. "Actually, Marcus," I said, my voice dropping to a low, serious register, "I didn't drink any of it." The silence on the line was instant. Absolute. I could hear the background noise on his end, the hum of traffic, maybe the sound of a television, but from my son, nothing. "You didn't," he whispered finally. "No. You know I can't drink, son. My heart meds. Dr. Wallace would skin me alive. And frankly, I like being alive." I heard him let out a breath. It sounded like frustration. Or panic. Or something worse. "Oh. Right. Yeah. Of course. So what did you do with it? Is it still there?" "No," I said casually, examining my fingernails. "I didn't want it tempting me in the house. You know how it is. An old man and his vices. So I regifted it." "You what?" His voice shot up an octave. It cracked like a teenager's. "I gave it away. Marcus, I sent it over to Robert. Which Robert? Your father-in-law, Robert, Tiffany's dad. I know he loves a good scotch. I sent it over by courier yesterday afternoon. He probably opened it last night watching the game." The sound that came out of my son's mouth next is something that will haunt me until the day I die. It wasn't a word. It wasn't a sentence. It was a strangled noise, like an animal caught in a steel trap. A sound of pure, unadulterated horror. "You gave it to Robert," he shouted. He wasn't just loud. He was hysterical. "Yes. Why are you shouting?" "It is a nice gift. He will appreciate it more than I." "Dad, you have to call him," Marcus screamed. "Call him right now. Tell him not to drink it." "Why, it is just whiskey, Marcus. What is wrong with you? Just call him." "No, wait. I will call him. You didn't open the seal, did you? You didn't touch it." I told you I sent it right over. Marcus, what is going on? Why are you panicking? He hung up. The line went dead. I sat there holding the receiver, staring at the wall. My heart started to beat a little faster, and not because of any whiskey. I have been a building inspector for 40 years. I know when a structure is about to collapse. I know the sound of a load-bearing wall giving way, and that panic in my son's voice. That was the sound of a roof caving in. Why would he be terrified of Robert drinking a bottle of high-end scotch? Unless there was something wrong with the scotch. Unless the scotch wasn't meant to be drunk. Or rather, it was meant to be drunk, but only by me. I stood up. My hands were shaking slightly. I grabbed my keys and my coat. I didn't call Robert. If Marcus was reacting like that, a phone call wasn't enough. I needed to see this for myself. I walked out to my truck, my old Ford F-150 that I keep running better than any new car on the lot. I drove toward downtown, toward Robert's condo. It was a 15-minute drive on a good day. I made it in 10. My mind was racing. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe Marcus had bought stolen liquor. Maybe it was bootleg and he was afraid Robert would notice the taste and realize it was fake. Maybe he was just embarrassed that I gave away his gift. But the fear in his voice, that wasn't embarrassment. That was mortal terror. As I turned onto the main avenue leading to the Marina Towers, I heard them. Sirens, not one but two, screaming down the street, weaving through the morning traffic. An ambulance and a police cruiser. Their blue and red lights bounced off the glass windows of the skyscrapers. My stomach dropped. I felt like I had swallowed a stone. I pressed the accelerator. I followed the lights. I watched as they turned into the entrance of the Marina Towers. Robert's building. No. Please, God, no. I pulled up to the curb, ignoring the doorman waving me away. I jumped out of the truck, leaving the door open. I saw the paramedics rushing through the glass doors with a stretcher. I ran. I am 70 and my knees aren't what they used to be, but I moved with a speed born of adrenaline and dread. I got to the lobby just as the elevator doors opened. They were wheeling a man out. He was strapped down, an oxygen mask over his face. His body was jerking, convulsing in a rhythm that looked unnatural, terrifying. His hands were clawing at the straps. His eyes were rolled back in his head, showing only the whites. Foam, white and frothy, was gathering at the corners of his mouth, bubbling up like a rabid animal. It was Robert, my friend, my contemporary, the only other person in this family who understood what it was like to be used by our children. Robert, I shouted. A paramedic pushed me back, his hand firm on my chest. Sir, stay back. Give us room. What happened? I asked, grabbing the man's arm. I am family. That is my daughter-in-law's father. What happened to him? Possible overdose or poisoning, the paramedic shouted over his shoulder as they ran toward the waiting ambulance. He was found unconscious on the floor. Seizing. We need to go. Now poisoning. The word hung in the cold morning air like toxic smoke. It swirled around me, choking me. I stood on the sidewalk watching the ambulance doors slam shut. I watched it speed away, lights flashing red and blue against the gray sky. And then I realized something that made my blood run cold. Marcus hadn't called Robert. He hadn't had time. The timeline didn't fit. From the moment he hung up on me to the moment the siren started, it had been minutes. The ambulance was already on its way when Marcus screamed at me. Or maybe he knew. Maybe he knew exactly what was happening because he knew exactly what was in that bottle. I looked at my reflection in the glass doors of the lobby. An old black man in a work coat standing helpless while his friend was hauled away. But the helplessness was fading, replaced by a cold, hard anger. Why was Marcus panicked before he knew Robert was in the hospital? Why did he scream, "Don't let him drink it," as if the drink itself was a bullet? The answer was simple, terrifying, and impossible to ignore. My son hadn't sent me a birthday gift. He had sent me a loaded gun, and he had pulled the trigger. He just didn't expect the bullet to hit someone else. I pulled out my phone. I dialed the number for the private courier service I had used yesterday. "Did you deliver the package to Robert Evans?" I asked the dispatcher. "Yes, sir. Delivered at 4 p.m. yesterday. Handed it directly to him. Thank you." I hung up. Robert had the bottle all evening. He probably opened it after dinner. One glass, maybe two. And now he was fighting for his life. I walked back to my truck. My hands were steady now. The structural failure was confirmed. The building wasn't just damaged. It was condemned. My son, my own flesh and blood, had tried to kill me. And in my ignorance, I had passed that death sentence onto an innocent man. I started the engine. I wasn't going home. I was going to the hospital. And then I was going to find that bottle. Because if there was poison in that whiskey, I was going to find it, analyze it, and use it to hang the people responsible. Otis King was done being a father. Today, the inspector was back on the job. And this time, I wasn't just writing citations. I was looking for a demolition permit. The waiting room of Chicago Mercy Hospital smelled like pine cleaner and bad news. It is a smell I know too well. It is the same smell that filled my nose 10 years ago when my own heart tried to quit on me. The fluorescent lights hummed with a headache-inducing frequency, casting a sick yellow pallor over everyone sitting in the plastic chairs. But nobody looked sicker than my son Marcus. He was sitting in the corner, hunched over with his elbows on his knees, his head in his hands. His leg was bouncing up and down like a piston in an engine that is about to blow a rod. Every time the automatic doors swooshed open, he flinched. He looked like a man waiting for the hangman, not a son waiting for news about his father-in-law. And then there was Tiffany. If Marcus was a portrait of guilt, Tiffany was a performance of grief. She was pacing the hallway, phone pressed to her ear, sobbing loudly enough for the entire floor to hear. She was talking to her friends, I assumed, updating her social circle on the tragedy. "Oh God, it is awful," she wailed, checking her reflection in the glass partition. "Daddy just collapsed. It is just like, so sudden. Please pray for us." I watched her with cold eyes. As a building inspector, you learn to spot the difference between a load-bearing wall and a facade. Tiffany was all facade. There was no structural integrity to her tears. Her eyes were dry every time she pulled the phone away. I walked over to the vending machine, bought a black coffee, and sat down opposite Marcus. I didn't say anything. I just sipped the bitter liquid and watched him. He finally looked up. His eyes were red-rimmed, but not from crying. They were bloodshot from stress. There was sweat beading on his upper lip despite the hospital being freezing cold. "Dad," he croaked. His voice was dry. "You are here." "I am here," I said calmly. "Where else would I be? Robert is my friend." Marcus swallowed hard. His Adam's apple bobbed. Did you tell anyone what Marcus, about the gift, the whiskey?" I took a slow sip of coffee. "Why would I talk about whiskey at a time like this? Son Robert is in a coma. The doctors are trying to save his life. Is the whiskey important?" He flinched again. No, of course not. Just, it might look bad that you gave him alcohol. It might look bad for who? Marcus, for me. Or for the person who bought it." Before he could answer, a doctor in blue scrubs pushed through the swinging doors. Tiffany immediately hung up her phone and rushed over, grabbing the doctor's arm with both hands. "Doctor, how is he? Is he alive?" "Tell me he is alive." The doctor looked tired. He gently removed Tiffany's hands. "Mrs. King, your father is stable for now, but he is in a critical condition. We have him on a ventilator. He suffered a massive seizure that led to cardiac arrest. We managed to get his heart rhythm back, but his brain activity is concerning." "What caused it?" I asked, standing up and stepping beside Tiffany. I wanted to hear this clearly. The doctor sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "It is hard to say definitively without the toxicology report, but given his age and history, it looks like a severe stroke, or possibly an adverse reaction to medication." "Did he eat anything unusual today, or take anything new?" Tiffany shook her head vigorously. "No, nothing. He eats the same thing every day. Oatmeal and toast. He is healthy as a horse." I felt a surge of anger. She was lying by omission. She knew about the bottle, but she wasn't going to mention it. Whatever it was, the doctor continued, it hit him hard and fast. "We are treating it as a cerebrovascular event for now. We will know more in 24 hours. You should go home, get some rest. There is nothing you can do here tonight." Tiffany slumped against Marcus, burying her face in his shoulder. "Oh, thank God it wasn't, something else." I narrowed my eyes. "Something else, like what, Tiffany?" She glared at me over Marcus's shoulder. Her mascara was perfectly intact. "Like, I don't know, Otis, like food poisoning, or something he picked up at your house." "I haven't seen Robert in a week," I said evenly. "Until today." "I need fresh air," Marcus mumbled, pushing Tiffany away gently. He looked like he was going to vomit. "I need to get out of here." They turned to leave. Tiffany grabbed her designer purse, looped her arm through Marcus's, and started marching him toward the exit. She didn't say goodbye. She didn't ask if I needed a ride. They were fleeing the scene. I watched them go. As soon as the elevator doors closed on them, I moved. I wasn't going home to rest. The doctor's diagnosis of a stroke was a convenient cover for them. If the police thought it was natural causes, they wouldn't investigate. They wouldn't seal the apartment. They wouldn't look for evidence. And that meant the evidence was sitting in Robert's living room unprotected. I walked out of the hospital and hailed a cab. I didn't want to take my truck. I wanted to be dropped off right in front of the Marina Towers without worrying about parking. "Take me to the Marina Towers," I told the driver, "and step on it." The city lights blurred past the window, but my mind was focused on one thing: the bottle, the Macallan 25. If I could get that bottle, I could get it tested. I could prove it was tainted. I could prove my son tried to kill me. But a nagging doubt was clawing at the back of my mind. Marcus's panic. The timeline. He had screamed at me before the ambulance arrived. Did he call someone else? Did he have a contingency plan? The cab pulled up to the circular driveway of the towers. I paid the driver and hurried inside. The doorman, a guy named Eddie who knew me from my visits to Robert, nodded somberly. "Terrible news about Mr. Evans, Mr. King," Eddie said. "They took him out of here fast. I need to get his heart medication, Eddie." I lied smoothly. "The doctors need to know exactly what dosage he was on. It is an emergency." "I don't know, Mr. King. I shouldn't really let anyone up without family permission. I am Family Eddie. My son is his son-in-law." "Look, do you want the doctors to give him the wrong medicine because we followed protocol?" Eddie hesitated, then pulled a key card from his belt. "Okay, but make it quick." He swiped me into the elevator. I watched the numbers climb. Floor 30, floor 31, floor 32. The hallway was quiet. Robert's door was at the end of the corridor. I didn't have a key, but I knew Robert kept a spare under the fake potted plant by the door. It was an old man trick, one I had told him 100 times was unsafe, but tonight I prayed he was still stubborn. I lifted the pot. The key was there. Thank God. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The apartment was dark. I didn't turn on the main lights. I used the flashlight on my phone. I swept the beam across the living room. It was a bachelor's apartment. Tidy, leather sofa, a big TV. And there on the coffee table was the setup. A crystal glass. A coaster. The wrapping paper from the box, black and shiny, crumpled in a pile. But something was wrong. I walked closer. My heart hammered against my ribs. The glass was empty. Not just empty, but dry. Clean. I touched it. No sticky residue, no smell of alcohol. It had been washed and placed back on the table. I looked at the coaster. There was a faint ring of moisture on the cork. Someone had set a cold drink there recently. But the drink was gone. And the bottle. The Macallan 25, the centerpiece of the crime. It was gone. I dropped to my knees and looked under the sofa. Maybe it rolled. Maybe he dropped it when the seizure hit. Nothing. I ran to the kitchen. The sink was dry. I opened the dishwasher. Empty. I opened the trash can under the sink. This was it. If Robert had opened the gift, the box, the cork, the foil seal, it all had to be here. I shined my light into the bin. It was empty. Completely empty. A fresh white liner bag had been put in. I stood up, gripping the edge of the counter so hard my knuckles turned white. The room spun slightly. This wasn't just a cleanup. This was a sanitization. Someone had been here. Someone had been here after Robert fell, but before I arrived. I checked my watch. The ambulance left at 9:30. I arrived at the hospital at 10. I stayed there for an hour. It was now 11:30 at night. Between the time Robert hit the floor and the time I walked in this door, someone had entered the apartment, washed the glass, taken the bottle, taken the trash, and left. Who the paramedics wouldn't clean up. The police wouldn't clean up. They would seal it off if they suspected anything or leave it messy if they didn't. It had to be someone with a key. Robert gave a spare key to Tiffany years ago for emergencies. I knew that. And by extension, Marcus had access to it. But they were at the hospital with me. I closed my eyes and replayed the morning. Marcus hung up on me at 9:20. The ambulance arrived at 9:35. Wait. Marcus's reaction. He didn't just panic. He reacted with specific knowledge. He knew the danger was immediate. Did he call someone, or did he come here himself? No, he arrived at the hospital in the same car as Tiffany. Tiffany. I remembered something. When I pulled up to the hospital, Tiffany wasn't crying. She was typing furiously on her phone, and when the doctor was talking to us, she wasn't asking medical questions. She was asserting that it was natural causes. She was selling a narrative. And now the evidence was gone. I walked back to the living room. I looked at the crumpled wrapping paper on the table. They had left that. Why? Because wrapping paper isn't a weapon. The bottle is the weapon. I picked up the black paper. It was the only thing left. As I smoothed it out, a small piece of white paper fluttered to the floor. It was the note I had written. Robert Marcus sent this to me, but you know I can't touch the stuff. I picked it up. My handwriting. My signature. If the police found this and then found a poisoned Robert, who would they blame? The man who sent the bottle. Me. But the bottle was missing. If the bottle was missing, there was no poison to find. If there was no poison to find, Robert died of a stroke. And if Robert died of a stroke, Tiffany inherited his estate. And if Tiffany inherited his estate, she could pay off Marcus's debts. But why take the bottle? Why not leave it and frame me? Because the poison inside, maybe it was traceable. Maybe it was something that could be linked back to Marcus. Or maybe they were just terrified that the plan had gone wrong. They wanted me dead, not Robert. Robert dying was messy. Robert dying brought an investigation. Me dying would have just been an old man's heart giving out. They were cleaning up a mistake, not framing a suspect. I pocketed the note. This was the only proof I had that the bottle ever existed. I took one last look around the apartment. It was too clean. It felt sterile. It felt like a stage set where a tragedy had been performed and the crew had already struck the props. I walked to the door, my hand on the knob. I needed to find that trash. They couldn't have taken it far. If they drove here, they would have dumped it somewhere along the route, or maybe down the garbage chute in the hall. I opened the door and looked at the garbage chute at the end of the hall. No, too risky. If the police searched the building's dumpster, they might find it. They would have taken it with them. I remembered the black Mercedes screeching into the hospital driveway. Marcus and Tiffany. They had come from somewhere. They hadn't come from their house that was in the suburbs. They had come from downtown. They had been here. Before the ambulance, or right after. It didn't matter. They had the bottle. And as long as they had the bottle, I had nothing but a theory. I stepped out into the hallway and locked the door. Otis, I whispered to myself, you are 70 years old. You are fighting a war against youth and greed, and right now you are losing. But as I walked to the elevator, a thought occurred to me, a detail from my construction days. You can clean a site, you can sweep the dust, you can paint over the cracks, but you always leave a footprint. I pulled out my phone and dialed a number. Not the police, not the hospital. I called Denzel, my lawyer, the shark. Otis, Denzel's voice was deep booming. It is late. Everything okay? No, Denzel. I need you to hire a private investigator tonight. What for? I need the security footage from the Marina Towers parking garage. Specifically from between 9 a.m. and 10 a.m. this morning. Otis, that is illegal without a warrant. I don't care, Denzel. I need to know if my son's car was here while his father-in-law was dying upstairs. There was a pause. Then Denzel chuckled darkly. I know a guy. It will cost you. I have money, Denzel. I have plenty of money. And right now I am going to spend every dime of it to make sure my son doesn't get away with murder. I hung up as the elevator doors opened to the lobby. The night air rushed in cold and biting. The game was on. They had the bottle, but I was going to get the tape. The Chicago wind off the lake cuts through you like a knife, especially at midnight. I stood in the alleyway behind the Marina Towers, pulling my collar up around my ears. My breath formed white clouds in the darkness. 5 minutes ago, I had walked out of Robert's apartment feeling defeated. The place had been scrubbed clean. No bottle, no glass, no evidence. It felt like the perfect crime, the kind where the victim is erased before he's even cold. But standing there in the cold, staring at the brick wall, my old instincts kicked in. I spent 40 years as a building inspector. You learn things about how buildings work, how they breathe, and how they expel waste. When you renovate a house, the debris has to go somewhere. When you clean up a crime scene, the evidence doesn't just vanish into thin air. It goes into a black plastic bag, and that bag goes down a chute. I looked up at the towering concrete structure. Robert lived on the 30th floor. The garbage chute empties into a central compactor or a large dumpster in the service bay. If whoever cleaned that apartment was in a hurry, and Marcus and Tiffany were definitely in a hurry, they wouldn't have driven the trash across town. They would have dumped it right here, assuming it would be mixed in with the refuse of 1,000 other tenants and lost forever. They made one mistake. They didn't know the schedule. I walked over to the loading dock. There was a metal sign bolted to the wall, refuse collection. Wednesdays and Saturdays, 6 Haduru a.m. It was Tuesday night. The truck hadn't come yet. I looked at the massive steel dumpster sitting in the shadows. It was overflowing with bags. It was a mountain of filth, a monument to the waste of the wealthy. And somewhere in that pile was the answer to whether my son tried to kill me. I am 70 years old. I have arthritis in my knees and a heart condition that requires daily medication. Climbing into a dumpster at midnight isn't exactly what the doctor ordered. But rage is a powerful fuel. It burns hotter than coal. I found a crate nearby, dragged it over, and hoisted myself up. The smell hit me instantly. Rotting fruit, stale beer, wet cardboard, and the sour stench of things better left unnamed. I gagged, pulling my scarf up over my nose. I clicked on my flashlight, the beam cutting through the gloom. I had to think logically. The bag would be near the top or close to it. It was dropped within the last few hours. It would be a kitchen bag, probably white with a drawstring, the kind Tiffany insists on buying because they are scented with lavender, an irony that wasn't lost on me. Lavender masking the smell of rot. Just like her smile masks her soul. I started digging. I moved bags of shredded office paper. I moved broken lamps. I moved pizza boxes. My hands were freezing even in my gloves. Every time I shifted a bag, the pile shifted under my feet, threatening to send me tumbling. Rats skittered along the rim of the dumpster, their eyes reflecting my light. I ignored them. I've dealt with worse vermin in City Hall. 10 minutes passed. 20. My back was screaming. I was starting to think I was crazy. Maybe they did take it with them. Maybe I was just an old man digging in trash for a ghost. Then I saw it. It wasn't a white bag. It was a clear recycling bag. Of course. Robert was meticulous about recycling. Even in a crisis, or perhaps because the cleaner didn't want to arouse suspicion by putting glass in the general trash, they used the blue bin bag. I tore it open. Coffee grounds, newspapers, a milk carton, and at the bottom, glinting in the beam of my flashlight, black paper. My heart stopped. I reached in my hand, trembling. I pulled out a wad of crumpled paper, satin finish, heavy stock. I smoothed it out on my knee. It was the wrapping paper, the same paper I had carefully taped up just yesterday afternoon. I dug deeper into the same bag. Where is it? Come on. My fingers brushed against something hard and rectangular. I pulled it out. The box. The Macallan 25 box. It was crushed on one side as if someone had stomped on it to fit it in the bin. I shook the box. Empty. I cursed out loud, the sound echoing in the alley. The bottle was gone. They must have smashed it or taken the glass with them to prevent fingerprints. Without the bottle, I had no liquid to test. Without the liquid, I had no poison. I sat there on the edge of the dumpster, holding the crushed box, feeling the cold seep into my bones. I had failed. I had found the wrapper but lost the candy. But then the inspector in me spoke up again. Look closer, Otis. Structural integrity. Check the seams. I shined the light inside the crushed box. At the bottom, the cardboard was dark, stained. I touched it with my gloved finger. It was wet, sticky. I brought the box closer to my nose. It smelled of rich oak and sherry, the whiskey. But there was an undertone. Something sweet, something chemical. And the consistency was wrong. Whiskey is thin like water. This stain was viscous, almost like syrup that hadn't fully dried. The bottle must have leaked. Or maybe when they were hastily cleaning up, a few drops spilled from the spout into the box before they tossed it. It wasn't much. A few milliliters soaked into the cardboard. But in my line of work, we can find asbestos in a dust mote. We can find lead in a paint chip the size of a fingernail. I didn't need the whole bottle. I just needed the residue. I climbed out of the dumpster, my knees cracking. I landed on the pavement with a grunt. I walked back to the light of the loading dock. I pulled a Ziploc bag from my coat pocket. I always carry them, old habit for keeping my pills dry, and carefully, surgically placed the crushed box inside. I sealed it tight. This was it. This was the smoking gun, or at least the gunpowder residue. I needed a lab. I couldn't go to the police yet. They would laugh at an old man with a piece of trash. I needed hard data. I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I hadn't used in years. Doc Miller. It's Otis. Otis King. The voice on the other end was groggy. Otis, it's midnight. You okay? Doc Miller ran a private environmental testing lab. We used to work together when the city was tearing down the old projects. He was the best chemist I knew, a man who could tell you what kind of paint was used on a wall 50 years ago just by smelling it. I have a sample, Doc. I need a full toxicology screen, and I need it fast. Rush job. Double your rate. Toxicology. Like, for a building gnome. For a murder attempt. Silence on the line. Then I will meet you at the lab in 20 minutes. Bring cash. I hung up. I felt a grim sense of purpose. I wasn't just a victim anymore, I was an investigator. Just as I was about to call a cab, my phone buzzed in my hand. I looked at the screen. The name flashed bright in the darkness. Marcus. My thumb hovered over the decline button. I didn't want to hear his voice. I didn't want to hear the lies. But if I didn't answer, he would get suspicious. He was fishing. I needed to play the fish. I took a deep breath, let the anger settle into a cold knot in my stomach, and answered. "Hello, Dad. It's Marcus." His voice was different now. Not panicked like this morning. He sounded concerned, solicitous. It was a performance. "I know it is late, Marcus," I said, making my voice sound tired and frail. "I was just heading to bed. I just wanted to check on you, Dad. Today was a lot. With Robert and everything. It was," I said, "a tragedy." "Yeah. Listen, Dad. I was thinking." "About the whiskey, here it comes. The hook. What about it?" I asked. "Well, Tiffany is really upset. She thinks, she is irrational right now, but she is worried that maybe the whiskey was bad. Like maybe it had gone off and that made Robert sick. He was testing the waters, planting the seed that it was an accident, spoiled goods, not poison." "Whiskey doesn't go bad, Marcus," I said. "It is 40% alcohol. It lasts forever." Right. But, are you sure you gave it to him? I mean, really sure. Because I was looking around his apartment when we were leaving just to grab his personal items and I didn't see it. Liar. You didn't just look, you scrubbed the place. I gave it to him." "Marcus," the courier confirmed it. "Okay, but maybe he threw it out, or maybe you put it somewhere else and forgot. Sometimes you get confused with your meds." He was gaslighting me, trying to make me doubt my own memory, trying to see if I knew where the bottle was. If I said I had it, he would come over and try to take it. If I said it was lost, he would relax. I decided to give him enough rope to hang himself. "Son, maybe you are right." I paused for effect. I heard him stop breathing on the other end. "What do you mean?" he asked too quickly. "I mean, my memory isn't what it used to be. That is why you want me in the home, right? I remember sending it. But maybe I just thought about sending it. Maybe I left it on the counter and the cleaning lady took it. Or maybe I did throw it out. I was so angry when I opened it. I let my voice trail off, sounding confused and weary. There was a long exhale from Marcus. It was the sound of a man who thinks he just got away with murder. "See, that makes sense, Dad. You probably just misplaced it. It happens. Don't worry about it. The important thing is that you are okay." "Yeah," I said. "I am okay. We will figure this out, Dad. Get some sleep. We can talk about future arrangements. Tomorrow." Future arrangements. He meant the nursing home. He meant taking my house. He thought he had won. He thought the evidence was gone and his father was a senile old fool who couldn't remember what he did with a bottle of scotch. "Good night, son," I said. I hung up the phone. I looked at the Ziploc bag in my hand, at the sticky, dark stain on the cardboard. "You think I am confused, Marcus? You think I am weak. But you forgot one thing. You forgot who taught you how to play chess. You forgot who taught you to look for the cracks in the foundation." I walked out of the alley to the street corner to hail a cab. The city was asleep, but I was wide awake. I had the sample. I had the motivation. And now, thanks to that phone call, I had the confirmation. He wasn't just a bad son. He was a hunter. He was checking his traps. But the rabbit wasn't in the snare. The rabbit was holding a bag of evidence and heading to a lab. I got into the cab. "Where to?" the driver asked. "West Side," I said. "And hurry. I have a building to inspect." As we drove away, I looked back at the Marina Towers one last time. High up on the 30th floor, the windows were dark. Robert was fighting for his life in a hospital bed. But down here, in the back seat of a yellow cab, the counterattack had just begun. Garbage doesn't lie, Marcus. It never lies. And neither does a father who has just realized he raised a monster. Doc Miller is a man who has seen asbestos tear apart lungs and lead poison entire elementary schools. Nothing rattles him. He has spent 30 years analyzing the toxic sludge of Chicago industrial history. But when he walked out of that glass-walled testing booth holding a single sheet of paper, he looked like he had seen a ghost. He took off his safety glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. The silence in the lab was heavy, broken only by the hum of the ventilation fans. "Otis," he said, his voice quiet. "You said this came from a whiskey bottle." "From the box," I corrected. "A stain on the cardboard. Why?" "What did you find?" Miller handed me the paper. It was covered in graphs and chemical spikes that looked like a mountain range. I didn't need to read the charts. I needed the bottom line. "We found high concentrations of two distinct substances mixed into the sherry oak profile," Miller said. "The first is ethylene glycol." "Antifreeze," I said. "I knew that one. It is sweet. It masks the taste of alcohol." "Exactly. It causes kidney failure, seizures, and eventually coma. It is nasty stuff. But that is not what worries me, Otis. It is the second compound." He pointed to a sharp spike on the graph. "Digoxin," he said. The room seemed to tilt sideways. I grabbed the edge of the metal table to steady myself. Digoxin. I knew that name. I knew it intimately. It was written on the orange pill bottle sitting on my kitchen counter right now. It was the medication I took every single morning to regulate my heart rhythm. "Digoxin," I whispered. "Yes, and not just a trace amount. The concentration in that stain suggests the bottle was spiked with enough crushed pills to stop a horse's heart, or in your case, to send a man with a pre-existing condition into cardiac arrest within 20 minutes. I stared at the paper. The numbers blurred. This wasn't just poison. This was a custom-made weapon. If I had drunk that whiskey, my heart would have stopped. The paramedics would have arrived. They would have seen my medical history. They would have seen digoxin in my blood work and assumed I had accidentally overdosed, or that my heart just finally gave out. It would have looked like natural causes, no autopsy, no investigation. Just a sad old man dying on his birthday. It was the perfect murder. And only one person knew my prescription. Only one person knew exactly what dose I took and how delicate my condition was, my son. I thanked Miller and told him to keep the results in a safe. I walked out into the cold night air feeling numb. The anger was gone, replaced by a hollow, aching void in my chest. My son didn't just want me dead. He wanted to erase me. He used the very medicine that keeps me alive to kill me. There is a special kind of cruelty in that. I sat in my truck for a long time watching the streetlights flicker. Why? That was the question that kept hammering in my brain. Why now Marcus and I weren't close, but we weren't enemies? Or so I thought. He was my only child. He was going to inherit everything eventually. Why the rush? Why the risk? People don't commit murder for sport. They do it for love, or they do it for money. And since there was no love lost between us, it had to be the money. I pulled out my phone. It was 2 a.m, but I knew a guy who never slept. Ray Vance, private investigator, ex-cop. He owed me a favor from back when I saved his house from being condemned over a faulty foundation. "Ray," I said when he picked up, "I need you to dig." "Who are we burying?" Otis Ray asked, his voice raspy from cigarettes. "My family," I said. "I need a full financial autopsy on Marcus and Tiffany, bank accounts, credit cards, investments, debts, everything. I want to know what they bought for lunch yesterday. And I want it by sunrise." Ray didn't ask questions. He knew better. I spent the rest of the night driving aimlessly through the city. I drove past the playground where I used to push Marcus on the swings. I drove past the high school where I watched him graduate. I was looking for the boy I raised, trying to find where he went wrong. But all I saw were shadows. At 6 a.m, my phone pinged. An email from Ray. Subject: the bleeding. I pulled over into a diner parking lot and opened the file. I read it once. Then I read it again. Then I put my phone down and put my head on the steering wheel. It wasn't just bad, it was catastrophic. Marcus wasn't just broke. He was underwater. Deep underwater. The report detailed a financial disaster that had been spiraling for months. Marcus had leveraged everything he had. He had taken out a second mortgage on his house without telling Tiffany, or maybe she knew it wasn't clear yet. He had maxed out 4 credit cards. But the real killer was cryptocurrency. My son, the genius lawyer, had convinced himself he was a day trader. He had poured $500,000 into a speculative coin that crashed 3 months ago. 500 grand. Vaporized. And where did he get that money? He borrowed it. Not from a bank, from a private lending firm with ties to some very unsavory characters in the Russian district. The kind of lenders who don't send overdue notices. They send guys with baseball bats. The payment was due next week. A balloon payment of $200,000 or they would take his house. And then there was Tiffany. I scrolled down to her section. While Marcus was setting money on fire, Tiffany was pouring gasoline on the ashes. $80,000 in credit card debt, designer bags, a trip to the Maldives she claimed was a business retreat, spa treatments that cost more than my monthly pension. They were living a lie, a glossy, high-fashion lie built on a foundation of sand, and the tide was coming in. I looked at the date on the foreclosure notice Ray had attached. The bank had already sent the warning. They had 10 days to pay up or get out. 10 days. That explained everything. That explained the desperation. That explained the sloppiness of using a bottle of whiskey instead of waiting for nature to take its course. They couldn't wait 5 years for me to die. They couldn't even wait 5 months. They needed my estate now. My assets are worth about $4 million. The rental properties, the land, the savings. If I died, Marcus would inherit it all immediately. He could pay off the loan sharks, pay off the bank, clear Tiffany's debt, and still have enough left over to play the big shot for the rest of his life. I was nothing more than a piggy bank to them. A piggy bank they had to smash open to survive. I felt a tear slide down my cheek. It was hot and angry. I looked at the photo of Marcus attached to the file. He was smiling at some gala, holding a glass of champagne, looking successful. Looking like a man who had it all. "You fool," I whispered. "You damn fool. You could have come to me. You could have told me you were in trouble. I would have yelled. I would have been disappointed. I would have made you work it off for the rest of your life. But I would have helped you. I would have saved you. But you didn't choose the hard conversation. You chose murder." My phone buzzed again. A text from Tiffany. "Hey Otis, hope you are feeling okay. We are going to swing by the hospital to check on my dad, then maybe come see you. We need to talk about some paperwork for your care." Paperwork. They weren't stopping. Robert surviving hadn't scared them off. It had only made them more desperate. They knew they were running out of time. If Robert woke up and remembered the bottle, they were finished. If the loan sharks came calling next week, they were finished. They needed to neutralize me. They needed to get me into a facility or get power of attorney or finish what they started. I looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror. My eyes were tired, but they were clear. The grief was still there, heavy and suffocating, but the inspector was in control now. I knew the structural flaws. I knew the load limits, and I knew exactly how to bring the whole house down. They wanted to talk about paperwork, fine. Let's talk about paperwork. I started the truck. I wasn't going home to hide. I was going to the hospital. I needed to see Robert, and I needed to set a trap. If they were drowning in debt, that was their weakness. Greed had made them blind. Fear had made them sloppy. I dialed Denzel, my lawyer. "Denzel, wake up. I need you to draft a document." "What kind of document?" Denzel yawned. "A trap," I said. "I want you to draw up a power of attorney, but I want you to bury a clause in there. A clause that triggers only if I am declared mentally incompetent." "Okay," Denzel said, sounding awake now. "And who are we giving this power to?" "To Marcus," I said. Silence on the line. "Otis, are you crazy? You just told me he might be trying to kill you." "Exactly," I said. "You catch a wolf with meat, Denzel. You don't catch him with a stick. I am going to dangle the one thing he wants more than anything in the world: control. I am going to let him think he has won. I am going to let him think he has the keys to the kingdom." And then I said, watching the sun rise over the skyline of the city that I helped build, "Then I'm going to lock the gates and burn the castle down with him inside." I hung up. The game had changed. It wasn't about survival anymore. It was about justice. And justice, just like a good whiskey, is best served cold. There is a specific kind of silence that comes before a demolition. It is the silence of a building that has been condemned, stripped of its life, and is just waiting for the charge to blow. That was the silence inside my house the next morning. I sat at my kitchen table nursing a cup of cold coffee, staring at a small black device in the palm of my hand. It was no bigger than a matchbox, a magnetic listening device. Ray, the private investigator, had dropped it in my mailbox at 4 a.m. along with the financial dossier. "Use this wisely," Otis, his note had said. Sometimes it is better not to know what people say when you leave the room. But I had to know. Ignorance wasn't bliss anymore. Ignorance was a death sentence. At 10 o'clock, Marcus's car pulled into the driveway. I watched him through the blinds. He sat in the car for a full minute before getting out. He was checking his reflection in the rearview mirror, fixing his hair, practicing his smile. It was chilling to watch. He was putting on a mask to come see his father. I shuffled to the door, making sure to hunch my shoulders a little more than usual. I needed him to see an old man. I needed him to see a victim, not a threat. "Hey, Dad," Marcus said as I opened the door. He tried to sound cheerful, but his eyes were darting around the hallway looking for... what? The bottle. The police. "Hello, son," I said, keeping my voice raspy. "To what do I owe the pleasure? I just came to pick up those old tax returns you mentioned last week." He lied. "And just to check on you. Yesterday was crazy." He walked past me into the living room. He didn't hug me. He didn't ask how I was sleeping. He started scanning the room immediately. "I haven't been able to find them, Marcus," I said, moving slowly to the kitchen. "My memory. It is getting worse. I put things down, and they just disappear. Like that whiskey bottle. I still can't remember if I sent it or if I poured it down the sink." I watched his back stiffen. He turned around slowly, a forced smile plastered on his face. "It is okay, Dad. Don't worry about the bottle. It is probably for the best." He spent 10 minutes pretending to look through a stack of old magazines on the coffee table. I offered him coffee. He declined. He was jittery. He wanted to leave. "I will walk you out," I said. We walked to his car. It was a sleek black sedan, leased, of course. Everything about Marcus was leased. As he unlocked the door, he dropped his keys. It was a clumsy move, nerves getting the better of him. "Whoops," he said, bending down. "Let me get that, son," I said. I moved faster than he expected. I bent down, grabbing the keys with my left hand, but with my right hand I reached under the chassis of the car, right below the passenger door. Click. The magnet took hold. The device was planted. "Here you go," I said, handing him the keys and straightening up with a groan. "My back isn't what it used to be." "Thanks, Dad." Marcus looked relieved. "I have to go pick up Tiffany. We are going to see a specialist for her dad." "Give him my best," I said. I watched him drive away. As soon as he turned the corner, I turned and walked back into the house, shedding the hunched posture like a heavy coat. I locked the door, bolted it, and went straight to my study. I opened my laptop and launched the software Ray had installed for me. A map appeared on the screen, a blinking red dot moving down 47th Street. I put on my noise-canceling headphones. The audio crackled to life. First, just the hum of the engine and the radio playing low, then the sound of a turn signal. The car stopped. A door opened. "Get in," Marcus said. The passenger door slammed shut. "Drive," a female voice snapped. It was Tiffany, and she wasn't crying anymore. I adjusted the volume. Her voice was sharp, jagged, like broken glass. "Did you find it?" she demanded. "No," Marcus replied. His voice sounded small. "He is confused, Tiff. He thinks he might have poured it out. He doesn't remember sending it to your dad. He is lying." Tiffany screamed. The audio spiked, hurting my ears. "The old bastard is lying. He knows something. Why else is he still alive?" "Keep your voice down," Marcus hissed. "The windows are down. I don't care. Do you realize what is happening? My father is in the ICU on a ventilator because of you, and that old mule is sitting in his mansion drinking coffee." "Because of me," Marcus shot back. "This was your idea, Tiffany. You said the heart meds would mimic a natural attack. You said it would be clean." I listened, my blood turning to ice. Hearing the theory is one thing. Hearing the confession is another. It felt like someone had reached into my chest and squeezed my heart. My son. My own son. "It doesn't matter whose idea it was," Tiffany yelled. "What matters is that it failed. And now we have a week, Marcus. 1 week. I know. Do you really? Because the bank called me again this morning. They are starting the foreclosure process on Tuesday. And your Russian friends, they sent a picture of our front door to my phone. They know where we live." I leaned closer to the screen. "Russian friends. The loan sharks. We need money." Marcus, Tiffany continued, her voice dropping to a terrifyingly cold tone. "And we need it now. My dad's insurance policy is barely enough to cover his hospital bills, let alone your crypto debt. He is useless to us right now. Useless. That is what she called her own father. A man fighting for his life. So what do we do? Marcus asked. He sounded defeated. We need Otis's assets, Tiffany said, and we need them immediately. He is not going to just give them to us, Tiff. He doesn't have to give them. He just has to die, or be declared incompetent. I gripped the edge of my desk. Think about it, Marcus, she said. Do you even know what he is sitting on? Yeah, the house. Not just the house, you idiot. Tiffany laughed, a harsh, barking sound. I did a property search on him last month. Your father has been holding out on us. He owns 3 apartment buildings in the South Side. 3 of them. Full occupancy. I froze. I had bought those buildings 20 years ago when the neighborhood was rough. I renovated them myself, kept the rents reasonable, and built a loyal community of tenants. I never told Marcus because I didn't want him asking for handouts. And that empty lot on 35th Street, she continued. The one he uses to park his old trucks, the city just rezoned it for commercial development. That dirt is worth $2 million alone. I closed my eyes. She knew. She had been digging into my life while smiling at my dinner table. Total assets, Marcus, she said, savoring the words. $4 million. Conservative estimate. $4 million, Marcus whispered. It sounded like a prayer. We could pay off the Russians. We could save the house. We could move to that place in Highland Park. We could be free. But he is alive, Marcus said. Not for long, Tiffany said. If the whiskey didn't work, we just have to be more direct. We can't wait for a heart attack. We have to make one happen. Or make him look so senile that the court gives us power of attorney by Friday. Friday, Marcus said. That is 3 days away. Then you better start thinking, Tiffany said. Because if we don't get control of those buildings by next week, we are dead. Literally dead. Those loan sharks won't just break your legs, Marcus. They will come for me too. And I am not going down because you were too much of a coward to deal with your father. There was silence in the car for a long moment. I could hear Marcus breathing heavily. Okay, he said finally. Okay, we will get the money. I don't care what it takes. We need that inheritance. That is my husband, Tiffany purred. Now drive to the hospital. We have to go play the grieving family for the doctors. The recording continued, but I took the headphones off. I couldn't listen anymore. I walked over to the window and looked out at my backyard. I saw the treehouse I had built for Marcus when he was 10. I saw the patch of grass where we used to play catch. I remembered the day he was born. I held him in my arms and promised I would protect him from the world. I promised I would build a future for him. And I did. I built the buildings, I bought the land, I saved every penny driving an old truck and wearing old clothes so that one day he would never have to struggle like I did. But I made a mistake, a fatal structural error. I gave him the cushion, but I never taught him how to handle the fall. I protected him from the struggle, and in doing so, I created a man who couldn't survive without a safety net. A man who would kill the builder just to sell the bricks. $4 million. That was the price of my life. That was the price of a father's love in the eyes of his son. I went back to my desk. I opened the drawer and pulled out a file. It was the deed to the land on 35th Street. The paper was yellowed with age. You want the land. Marcus, I whispered to the empty room. You want the buildings. I picked up my pen. My hand wasn't shaking anymore. It was steady as a rock. I am going to give you exactly what you want. I am going to dangle the bait right in front of your hungry faces. I dialed Denzel again. I have the plan, I said. Tell me Otis. They know about the properties, I said. They know about the South Side buildings. That is their target. So we protect them, Denzel asked. Put them in a trust. No, I said. We weaponize them. I outlined the trap. It was risky. It was dangerous. It required me to put myself in a room with 2 people who wanted me dead. But it was the only way to expose them. It was the only way to save myself and get justice for Robert. Otis Denzel said, his voice worried. If this goes wrong, I am dead anyway, Denzel. But if it goes right, they won't just lose the money. They will lose their freedom. I hung up. I looked at the blinking red dot on the screen. It had stopped at the hospital. Go ahead, son. Go act sad for the cameras. Go hold your dying father-in-law's hand. Because while you are playing a role, I am writing the final act. And in this version of the story, the old man doesn't die. the old man burns the house down. The art of the trap lies not in the steel of the jaws, but in the sweetness of the bait. If you want to catch a wolf, you have to make him believe you are a wounded sheep. You have to show him your throat. You have to let him smell the blood and think the kill is easy. I sat on the edge of my bed, looking at the phone in my hand. My heart was beating steadily, a rhythmic thump, thump, thump that had kept me going for 70 years. But in a moment, I was going to have to make it skip a beat. I was going to have to perform the greatest acting role of my life. I was going to play the part of the dying old man, the burden, the confused, senile father who was finally ready to be put out to pasture. It was a gamble, a massive, dangerous gamble. If I played this wrong, they might actually let me die. If I played it right, I would get the final piece of evidence I needed to bury them. I took a deep breath, checking the hidden camera button on my shirt. It was a tiny lens disguised as a button a piece of tech Ray had given me along with the wire. I was wired for sound and vision. I was a walking surveillance state. I dialed Marcus's number. I let my voice tremble. I let the air wheeze out of my lungs. "Marcus," I gasped into the receiver. "Marcus, help me. My chest." "Dad." His voice spiked with instant adrenaline. "Dad, what is it?" "It hurts, son," I groaned, dropping the phone onto the carpet so it sounded like a fall. "I can't breathe. Everything is spinning." I heard him shouting on the other end. I heard Tiffany in the background asking what was happening. I didn't answer. I just let out a low moan and let the line stay open. I lay back on the rug, clutching my chest, waiting. I waited for 10 minutes. In those 10 minutes, I stared at the ceiling fan spinning above me. I thought about the days when I used to lift Marcus up to touch the blades when he was a toddler. I thought about how he used to think I was Superman. Now he was racing here not to save Superman, but to bury Clark Kent. The front door burst open. I had left it unlocked. Dad Marcus shouted, running up the stairs. He burst into the bedroom. His face was pale. For a second, I saw genuine fear in his eyes. Maybe somewhere deep down beneath the debt and the greed, the little boy who loved me was still there. But then Tiffany walked in behind him. She wasn't looking at me. She was looking around the room. She was looking at the dresser where I kept my wallet. She was calculating. "Call 911. Marcus yelled, pulling out his phone. "No," Tiffany said sharply. Her hand shot out and grabbed his wrist. "Not 911. What? He is dying." "Tiff, if we call 911, they will take him to County General," she hissed. "They have his records. They know his doctors. We need to take him to Dr. Thorne." "Thorne? Who is Thorne?" "He is a specialist." She lied smoothly. "A geriatric cardiologist. He is a friend of the family. He will take better care of him. And he understands privacy. Privacy. Code for secrecy. Code for a doctor who can be bought." I let out another groan, clutching my shirt. "Water," I whispered. "Help me get him up," Marcus said, ignoring her and grabbing my arm. "We are taking him to the car." The ride to the clinic was a blur of feigned agony. I slumped in the back seat, my eyes half closed, watching them through my lashes. Marcus was driving fast, his knuckles white on the wheel. Tiffany was in the passenger seat texting. She wasn't looking back at me. She was arranging the welcome party. We didn't go to the main hospital. We went to a private clinic in the affluent suburbs, a place with marble floors and hushed hallways. It looked more like a hotel than a medical facility. Dr. Thorne was waiting for us. He was a tall man with a slick smile and eyes that didn't smile with his mouth. He wore a white coat that looked like it had never seen a drop of blood. "Mr. King," he said, his voice like oil. "Let's get you examined." They wheeled me into a private room. Thorne listened to my heart with a stethoscope that felt like a block of ice. He checked my pulse. He shone a light in my eyes. I played my part. I stared blankly at the wall. I mumbled about the war. I called Marcus by my brother's name. "Is he okay?" Marcus asked anxiously, hovering by the door. Thorne straightened up and ushered them into the corner of the room. He didn't close the door fully. He didn't lower his voice enough. He thought I was gone, mentally absent. "Physically, he is stable," Thorne said. "His heart rate is elevated, likely a panic attack induced by early-onset dementia." "Dementia?" Marcus asked. "But he has never—" "It presents quickly," Thorne interrupted. "Confusion. Memory loss, paranoia. Tiffany tells me he has been forgetting things. Losing items." "Yes," Tiffany chimed in, stepping closer to the doctor. He lost a bottle of expensive whiskey just yesterday. He didn't even remember buying it. And he has been aggressive, paranoid. He thinks people are stealing from him. I lay on the bed, my fists clenched under the sheet. They were writing the narrative. They were painting the picture of a madman. This is very common, Thorne said, nodding gravely. And it is dangerous. Patients in this state can hurt themselves or others. They can make rash financial decisions. They can be easily manipulated by strangers. We are very worried about his assets. Tiffany said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. He has a lot of property. If he signs something in this state... Exactly, Thorne said. You need to protect him. You need legal guardianship, immediately. But how, Marcus asked. It takes months to get a court order. Not if I sign an emergency capacity declaration, Thorne said. I can certify that he is a danger to himself. That will give you temporary power of attorney for 30 days. Enough time to stabilize his affairs. 30 days. Enough time to sell the buildings. Enough time to drain the accounts. Enough time to pay the Russians and leave me penniless in a state-run facility. But he needs to be calm, Thorne added. If he goes to court, he might make a scene. He might seem lucid for short bursts. We need to manage his anxiety. Manage his anxiety. I knew what that meant. I have a new medication, Thorne said, pulling out a prescription pad. Haloperidol. A strong antipsychotic, combined with a heavy sedative. It will keep him restful, compliant. He won't be agitated. He will sleep most of the time. Marcus looked at the doctor, then at me lying on the bed. Will it hurt him? He asked. It will bring him peace, Thorne said, smiling that shark smile. And it will give you peace of mind. Do it, Tiffany said. Write the script. I watched as the doctor scribbled on the pad. The scratching of the pen sounded like nails on a coffin. He tore the sheet off and handed it to Tiffany. Get this filled at the pharmacy downstairs, Thorne said. Start him on 2 pills tonight. By morning, he won't know his own name. Thank you, Dr. Tiffany said, beaming. You are a lifesaver. She wasn't talking about saving my life. She was talking about saving her lifestyle. Thorne walked over to me. He patted my shoulder with a hand that felt slimy. You just rest now, Mr. King, he said, loud and slow, like he was talking to a child. We are going to take good care of you. I looked him right in the eye. I wanted to spit in his face. I wanted to tell him that I had inspected buildings built by crooks like him for 40 years, and I knew exactly how to bring them down. But I stayed silent. I let my eyes drift shut. I let my mouth hang open slightly. Good, Marcus said. Let's get him home. They drove me back to my house. The mood in the car was celebratory. Tiffany was humming along to the radio. Marcus seemed relieved, as if a great weight had been lifted off his shoulders. They thought the problem was solved. The old man was crazy. The doctor was bought. The drugs were in hand. They walked me to my bedroom. Tiffany went to the kitchen to get water and the pills. Here, Dad, Marcus said, helping me sit on the edge of the bed. You need to sleep. Tiffany came in with a glass of water and 2 small white pills in her palm. Take these, Otis, she said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. They are vitamins for your heart. I looked at the pills. Death in tablet form. Chemical lobotomy. I took them. I put them in my mouth. I took a sip of water. Good boy, she said, patting my head. I swallowed. Or at least I pretended to. I have a trick I learned from my grandfather, a man who didn't trust doctors either. I tucked the pills under my tongue deep in the pocket of my cheek. I swallowed the water loudly. I opened my mouth to show them it was empty. Good, she said. Now lie down. I lay back. They stood there watching me, waiting for the drugs to kick in. It won't take long, she whispered to Marcus. Let's go find the deed. They walked out of the room, leaving the door slightly ajar. As soon as their footsteps faded down the hall, I sat up. I spit the pills into my hand. They were starting to dissolve, bitter and chalky. I grabbed a tissue and wiped my mouth. I wrapped the pills carefully in the tissue and put them in my pocket. Evidence. I had the audio of them plotting. I had the prescription from the corrupt doctor, and now I had the attempted chemical assault. I stood up silently. My heart wasn't racing anymore. It was cold. It was steel. I crept to the door and listened. They were in my study. I could hear drawers opening and closing. Where is it? Tiffany was hissing. He said the deed to the land was in the blue file. I can't find it, Marcus said. Maybe he moved it. Keep looking. We need the lot numbers to list it tomorrow. They were robbing me while they thought I was comatose in the next room. I walked back to the bed and sat down. I needed to wait. I needed them to leave. I needed to get these pills to the lab to confirm what they were. And then I needed to call Denzel. The trap was set. They had taken the bait. They thought they had a senile old man. What they had was a building inspector with a demolition order and a pocket full of poison. I lay back down and closed my eyes, waiting for the sound of the front door closing, waiting for the war to truly begin. Tomorrow I would be a zombie. I would drool. I would stumble. I would give them exactly what they wanted. And while they were busy celebrating their victory, I would be tightening the noose around their necks. There is a special kind of hell reserved for children who betray their parents. I used to think the deepest circle was for those who neglect us, who leave us to rot in nursing homes while they spend our inheritance. But I was wrong. The deepest circle is for those who look us in the eye, see our suffering, and use it as leverage. I was sitting in my study, the heavy velvet curtains drawn tight against the afternoon sun. To the world, and specifically to my son and daughter-in-law, I was currently a vegetable. I was supposed to be drooling on my pillow, knocked out by the heavy dose of antipsychotics they thought I had swallowed. In reality, I was wide awake, fueled by caffeine and a cold, burning rage. On the computer monitor in front of me was a live feed. It was grainy, black and white, but clear enough to see the truth. It was a view inside room 402 of the intensive care unit at Mercy Hospital. Getting that camera in there wasn't easy, but when you have spent 40 years inspecting every major building in Chicago, you make friends in low places. The head of hospital maintenance, a man named Sal, owed me his pension. I had overlooked a few code violations in his basement renovation 10 years ago, saving him $50,000. Yesterday I called in that favor. He put a pinhole camera in the smoke detector directly above bed number 1. Bed number 1 held Robert, my friend, my contemporary, the man who had taken the bullet meant for me. Robert had been in a coma for 36 hours. The doctors said the combination of digoxin and antifreeze had caused a massive stroke in his left hemisphere. They didn't know if he would wake up. They didn't know who he would be if he did. I watched the screen, sipping my lukewarm coffee. The rhythmic beep of the heart monitor was the only sound in my study. It was a hypnotic, steady pulse that reminded me that life was fragile. Then the rhythm changed. The beeping sped up. On the screen, I saw Robert's hand twitch. It was a small movement, just a flutter of fingers against the white sheet, but it was there. Then his eyelids fluttered. He was waking up. I leaned closer to the screen, my breath catching in my throat. "Come on, Robert. Fight it. Come back to us." His eyes opened. Even through the grainy camera feed, I could see the confusion, the panic. He tried to lift his head, but it fell back against the pillow. He tried to move his right arm, but it lay there like a dead weight. The stroke had taken his right side. His mouth opened. He was trying to speak, but no sound came out, just a dry, rasping breath. The paralysis had hit his vocal cords too. He was trapped, a prisoner in his own broken body. I felt a tear slide down my cheek. I knew that feeling of helplessness. I knew it every time I looked at Marcus and saw a stranger instead of my son. A nurse bustled in, checking the monitors. She saw he was awake and smiled, patting his good hand. She said something I couldn't hear, probably reassuring him, telling him to rest. Then she left to get the doctor. But the doctor didn't come next. The door to the room opened slowly. A figure stepped inside. It was Tiffany. She was dressed in a sleek black dress appropriate for a grieving daughter, but her walk was all wrong. She didn't rush to the bedside. She didn't look relieved. She walked with the predatory grace of a cat stalking a wounded bird. She closed the door behind her. She looked up at the camera in the corner of the room, the security camera, not my hidden one, and positioned herself so her back was to it. She was smart. She knew how to play the angles, but she didn't know about the smoke detector above her head. My camera caught her face perfectly. There were no tears. There was no sadness. There was only cold, hard calculation. She walked to the side of the bed. She looked down at her father. Robert looked up at her, his eyes widening. I saw a flicker of hope in his gaze. It was his daughter, his little girl. Maybe she was here to save him. Tiffany leaned down. She brushed a lock of gray hair off his forehead. It looked like a tender gesture. Then she spoke. I had turned the volume on my speakers all the way up. The microphone in the smoke detector was sensitive. It picked up the hum of the ventilator, the squeak of her shoes, and her voice. "Hi, Daddy," she whispered. Robert tried to speak again. His lips moved, forming shapeless shapes. A groan escaped his throat. "Shh," Tiffany said, putting a manicured finger to his lips. "Don't try to talk. The doctor says you can't speak yet." She paused, a small, cruel smile playing on her lips. "That is actually a good thing, isn't it? Because if you could talk, you might say something stupid." Robert's eyes darted around the room. He was confused. He didn't understand why his daughter was looking at him like he was a bug under a microscope. "You remember the whiskey, don't you, Daddy?" she asked softly. "The Macallan. The one Otis sent you." Robert blinked. A tear leaked from the corner of his eye. He remembered. Of course he remembered. It was the last thing he tasted before the darkness took him. "I know you figured it out," she continued, leaning closer so her mouth was inches from his ear. "You are smart. You always were. You realized it tasted wrong. Maybe you even realized it was poison." Robert's good hand clenched the sheet. He started to shake. The heart monitor began to beep faster. "Beep, beep, beep, beep. Calm down," Tiffany hissed. "If the nurses come in, I will leave. And you don't want to be alone, do you?" She waited until he stopped struggling. She waited until she had total control. "Listen to me very carefully, Daddy. That bottle wasn't meant for you. It was a mistake. A stupid clerical error. It was meant for Otis." I watched Robert's face contort in horror. He was hearing his daughter confess to attempted murder. Not just murder, but the murder of his friend. "But you drank it." She sighed as if he had inconvenienced her by being poisoned. "And now we are in a mess. A big mess." She grabbed his good hand. She squeezed it. Not with love, but with force. I could see her knuckles turning white. "If you tell anyone, if you manage to scribble a note or blink a code or find a way to tell the police about the bottle, do you know what will happen?" She paused for effect. "I will go to prison, Daddy, your little girl. Your Tiffany. I will go to a federal prison for the rest of my life. Is that what you want? Do you want to see me in a cage? Do you want to destroy my life because of a mistake?" Robert stared at her. The betrayal in his eyes was so raw it hurt to watch. He was realizing that the monster wasn't under the bed. The monster was holding his hand. "And it is not just me," she added, playing her ace. "It is Marcus too, and your future grandchildren. If I go away, everything falls apart. The house, the family, the legacy. You will be all alone in a state facility with no one to pay your bills." She stroked his cheek again. The touch made Robert flinch. "So here is the deal. You are going to be quiet. You are going to focus on getting better. And when the police ask you what happened, you are going to shake your head. You don't remember. It was just a stroke. Just bad luck." She leaned in even closer, her voice dropping to a terrifying hiss. "Because if you don't, if you decide to be a hero, I will tell them you were depressed. I will tell them you bought the poison yourself. I will tell them you tried to kill yourself because you were lonely. And I will make sure everyone believes it. I will ruin your reputation before I let you ruin my life." Robert closed his eyes. Tears were flowing freely now, soaking the pillow. He was broken. Not by the poison, but by the words. His spirit had been snapped in half. "Good," Tiffany said, straightening up and smoothing her dress. "I knew you would understand. You have always been a good father, always sacrificing for me." She looked at her watch. "I have to go now. Marcus is waiting in the car. He is too weak to come up here. He is crying. He loves you so much, Daddy. We both do." She bent down and kissed his forehead. A Judas kiss. "Sleep now. And remember, silence is golden." She turned and walked out of the room. As she opened the door, her face transformed instantly. The coldness vanished, replaced by a mask of tragic grief for the benefit of the nurses in the hallway. I sat in my study staring at the screen. The feed showed only my friend weeping silently in a sterile room. My hands were shaking, not from fear but from a rage so pure it felt like white heat. I had seen evil in my life. I had seen corrupt politicians, crooked contractors, and violent criminals. But I had never seen anything like this. This was intimate evil. This was the weaponization of love. She had stripped him of his dignity. She had threatened him with his own love for her. She had admitted that I was the target and that he was just collateral damage. I reached out and stopped the recording. I saved the file. I named it The Confession. This video was the nail in her coffin. It proved motive. It proved intent. It proved she was the mastermind. Marcus might be the weak executioner, but Tiffany was the judge and jury. I looked at Robert one last time on the screen. "Hold on, old friend," I whispered. "You don't have to speak. You don't have to say a word." I heard everything. I picked up the phone. It was time to initiate the next phase. They thought I was sedated. They thought Robert was silenced. They thought they had won, but they forgot one thing. Buildings don't just fall down. They give warnings. Cracks appear. Dust falls. Groans echo in the walls. Tiffany and Marcus had ignored the warnings. They were standing inside a structure that was already collapsing, and I was about to kick out the final support beam. I stood up and walked to the mirror. I looked at myself. The old, tired Otis was gone. The man staring back at me was a father who had just decided to orphan himself. I took the fake pills out of my pocket and flushed them down the toilet. "Let's go to work," I said to the empty house. "It is time to rewrite the will." Lying in my own bed had never felt so much like lying in a coffin. The curtains were drawn, casting long, suffocating shadows across the room where I had slept for 30 years. To the naked eye, I was Otis King, a 70-year-old man lost in the fog of heavy sedation, a drooling, helpless invalid waiting for the end. But inside that shell, my mind was sharp, ticking like a countdown timer on a demolition charge. I had flushed the poison pills down the toilet hours ago, but I had to play the part. I lay perfectly still, keeping my breathing shallow and rhythmic, listening to the silence of the house. It wasn't a peaceful silence. It was the silence of a crime scene before the tape goes up. I heard the floorboards creak in the hallway. I knew that sound. It was the loose board outside my door, the one I had been meaning to fix since last summer. It groaned under the weight of someone trying to move quietly but failing. The door handle turned slowly. Through the narrow slit of my eyelids, I saw him, Marcus, my son. He didn't look like the boy I raised. He looked like a cornered animal. His shirt was untucked, his hair messy, and he smelled of stale coffee and fear. He wasn't alone. He was carrying a leather portfolio under his arm and a small black ink pad in his hand. He crept toward the bed, his eyes darting to the door as if he expected the police to burst in. He stood over me for a long moment. I could hear his breathing. It was fast, ragged. He was terrified, but desperation is a powerful fuel. "Dad," he whispered. I didn't move. I let my mouth hang open slightly, a trickle of saliva pooling at the corner of my lip. I made sure my hand lay limp on top of the duvet, open and vulnerable. Marcus let out a shaky breath. He placed the portfolio on the nightstand and opened it. I saw the documents. Even upside down, I recognized the legal formatting. It was a quitclaim deed, a document that would transfer ownership of my 3 Southside apartment buildings and the commercial lot directly to him. No money changing hands, just a gift, a $4 million gift from a man who was supposed to be out of his mind. He pulled the cap off the ink pad. "I am sorry, Dad," he muttered, though his voice lacked any real remorse. It was just noise to fill the silence. "We have to do this. We don't have a choice." He reached out and grabbed my right hand. His hand was cold and clammy. Mine was warm, rough, with calluses from decades of laying brick and framing walls. The contrast broke my heart. These hands had built a life for him, and now he was using his soft hands to steal it. He pressed my thumb onto the black ink pad. The sensation was cold and wet. "Just one print," he whispered. "Just one print and it is all over." He moved the document closer, positioning it on the mattress next to my hip. He started to guide my inky thumb toward the signature line. I knew I couldn't let that thumb hit the paper. If he got the print, he could notarize it with one of his crooked friends, and by tomorrow morning my tenants would be receiving eviction notices and the land would be sold to the highest bidder. I had to act. But I couldn't break character. I couldn't jump up and punch him much as I wanted to. I had to be the sick old man. I waited until my thumb was an inch from the paper. Then I triggered the spasm. I jerked my entire body violently to the left, letting out a guttural choking sound. My arm flailed out not at Marcus, but wild and uncontrolled. My hand struck the glass of water sitting on the nightstand. It was a heavy glass full to the brim. It went flying. Splash! The water cascaded over the nightstand, over the bed, and most importantly, directly onto the open portfolio. The document was soaked instantly. The cheap printer ink began to bleed. The paper curled and soured. Marcus jumped back, dropping my hand. The ink from my thumb smeared across the pristine white duvet cover, leaving a black stain like a bruise. "Damn it," Marcus screamed. He snatched up the document, shaking it frantically. Water sprayed everywhere. The paper tore in his hands, soggy and useless. The legal text was already dissolving into a gray blur. "No, no, no," he yelled, throwing the ruined wet pulp onto the floor. He turned to me, his face twisted in pure, unadulterated rage. For a second, I thought he was going to hit me. He raised his fist, his teeth bared. "You stupid old—" He stopped himself. He took a deep breath, running his hands through his hair, pacing the room. That was the only copy, he muttered to himself. "The printer is out of ink downstairs. I have to go back to the office. I don't have time for this." This was my moment. The disruption had worked, but anger makes people unpredictable. I needed to shift his focus. I needed to pivot from being an obstacle to being an opportunity. I let out a low groan. I fluttered my eyelids, opening them slowly, unfocused, staring at the ceiling. "Marcus," I croaked. My voice was a dry rasp. He stopped pacing. He looked at me, suspicion warring with impatience. "Dad, you are awake." I blinked slowly, trying to look like a man swimming up from the bottom of a deep, dark ocean. "Water," I whispered. "Thirsty." He looked at the broken glass on the floor, then at me. He didn't move to get me water. He just stood there waiting to see if I was lucid enough to sign another paper if he went and printed one. "Marcus," I said, turning my head slowly to look at him. I had a dream." He stepped closer, frowning. "A dream? Go back to sleep, Dad." I saw Malik," I said. "Malik is his son, my grandson. He is 10 years old, a sweet boy who loves dinosaurs, and who I haven't seen in 6 months because Tiffany thinks my house smells like old people." "Malik?" Marcus asked, his voice softening just a fraction. "Yes," I whispered, tears welling in my eyes, real tears this time, because I really did miss that boy. I saw him running in the yard. He looked so happy. I reached out my hand, the one stained with ink. Marcus looked at it with disgust, but he didn't pull away. "I am dying, son," I said. "I can feel it. The doctor, he gave me those pills, but I feel the darkness coming." "Don't talk like that," Marcus said automatically, though his eyes were checking his watch. "It is true," I said. "And I have been thinking about the legacy, about what I leave behind." Marcus froze. He leaned in. This was the magic word. Legacy. Assets. Money. "What about it, Dad?" "I don't want the state to take it," I wheezed. "I don't want the taxes to eat it up. I want to rewrite the will." Marcus's eyes widened. "Rewrite the will." "But Dad, you have a will." "It is old," I said. "It leaves things to charities, to the church." This was a lie. My current will left everything to Marcus. But he didn't know that for sure. He always suspected I would give it away because I was tough on him. "I want to change it." I continued, my voice gaining a little more strength, driven by a fake surge of final energy. "I want to leave it all. To family. To Malik. And to you to guide him." Marcus stood up straight. I could see the wheels turning in his head. If I died right now without a new will, he would have to fight for probate. It could take months. The bank would foreclose next week. But if I wrote a new will explicitly naming them and he was the executor for a minor, he would have control immediately. "You want to leave it to Malik?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "Everything. The buildings, the land, all of it. For his future." Marcus licked his lips. He looked at the soggy mess of the quitclaim deed on the floor. That was a desperate illegal move. A new will that was clean, that was legal, that was bulletproof. When he asked, "When do you want to do this?" "Tomorrow," I whispered, closing my eyes as if exhausted by the confession. "Call Denzel. Call my lawyer. Tell him to come tomorrow morning. I want to sign it before I go." "Tomorrow," Marcus repeated. I could see the calculation. He was weighing the risk. Could they wait one more day? The foreclosure was Tuesday. Today was Wednesday. They had time. Just barely. But if I died tonight before signing, he risked everything. He needed me alive. He needed me lucid enough to sign a will, but sick enough to die right after. "Okay, Dad," he said, his voice trembling with excitement. "Okay. We will do that. We will call Denzel in the morning. He reached down and patted my shoulder. It was the touch of a butcher inspecting a prize cow. You rest now, he said. You need your strength for tomorrow. You are doing the right thing. For Malik. For Malik, I whispered. He scrambled to pick up the wet papers from the floor, hiding the evidence of his failed crime. I will get you some water, he said, and then I will let you sleep. He hurried out of the room. I heard him running down the stairs. I heard him pull out his phone. Tiffany, I heard him hiss from the hallway downstairs. Stop the plan. Don't give him any more pills tonight. No, listen to me. He wants to sign a new will. He wants to give it all to Malik. Yes. Everything. We just have to keep him alive until tomorrow morning. I lay back on the pillow, letting out a long, slow breath. The trap was set. They wouldn't kill me tonight. They would guard me like a pot of gold. They would sit by my bedside and wipe my brow, praying for me to live just 12 more hours. And in those 12 hours, I would be ready. I looked at the ink stain on my thumb. It was black and ugly. But it wasn't a mark of shame. It was war paint. Tomorrow morning, Denzel would come. But he wouldn't be bringing a will. He would be bringing the police. And instead of signing my life away, I was going to sign their arrest warrants. Sleep well, Marcus, I thought as I heard him coming back up the stairs with the water. Because this is the last peaceful night you are going to have for a very, very long time. The morning sun didn't feel like a blessing. It felt like a spotlight on a stage where the final act of a tragedy was about to be performed. I lay in bed, propped up by 3 pillows, wearing my pajamas. My hands were trembling partly from the acting role I was playing, but mostly from the adrenaline coursing through my veins. Today was the day. Today was the signing. Downstairs, I could hear the murmur of voices. Marcus and Tiffany were already up, fueled by the nervous energy of people who are about to steal $4 million. They had cleaned the house, opened the curtains, and set the dining room table as if for a Thanksgiving feast. But the main course wasn't a turkey. It was me. At 9 o'clock sharp, the doorbell rang. I heard the heavy footsteps coming up the stairs. Marcus opened the bedroom door, his face flushed with excitement. "Dad," he said, his voice soft and solicitous. "The lawyers are here. Can you make it downstairs, or should we bring them up?" "I will come down," I wheezed, throwing off the covers. "I want to do this properly." Sitting at the head of the table, Marcus helped me up. I leaned heavily on his shoulder, letting my legs drag a little. I needed him to feel my weight. I needed him to believe that I was nothing more than a burden he was about to shed. We walked slowly down the stairs. In the dining room, 2 men were waiting. The first was a man I had never met. He was short, balding, with a suit that looked expensive but fit him poorly. He smelled of stale cigarette smoke and cheap cologne. He had a nervous tic in his left eye. This was their lawyer, the hired gun. "Mr. King," the man said, extending a sweaty hand. "I am Arthur Gable. I represent your son and daughter-in-law in this matter." I shook his hand weakly. I didn't like him. He had the eyes of a rat looking for cheese. And then there was the second man. Standing by the window, blocking out the sun with his sheer size, was Denzel, my lawyer, my friend. Denzel is 6'4", a former linebacker who put himself through law school by working construction. He doesn't look like a lawyer. He looks like a bodyguard. He was wearing a charcoal suit that cost more than Marcus's car. He didn't smile. He just nodded at me, a microscopic movement that said, "I got you." "Hello, Denzel," I whispered. "Otis." Denzel rumbled. His voice is deep, like stones grinding together. "Good to see you. Let's get this over with," Tiffany said. She was standing by the sideboard pouring coffee. Her hands were shaking. She was trying to look like the grieving daughter-in-law, but she looked like a junkie waiting for a fix. We all sat down. I took the head of the table. Marcus and Tiffany sat on my left. Gable sat next to them. Denzel sat on my right, a silent fortress. Gable cleared his throat and opened his briefcase. He pulled out a thick document bound in blue paper. "Mr. King," he began, his voice oily. "As per your instructions conveyed through your son, we have drafted a new last will and testament. This document revokes all previous wills and establishes a trust for the benefit of your grandson, Malik King." He slid the document across the mahogany table toward me. I put on my reading glasses. My hands shook violently. I made sure to rattle the paper. "Read it to me," I said. "My eyes, they aren't good today." "Of course," Gable said. He began to read. The legal jargon washed over the room. It sounded standard. It sounded benevolent. All assets, real estate, and liquid cash to be held in trust for Malik King until his 25th birthday. It sounded perfect, until he got to Clause 4, Section B. However, Gable read, speeding up slightly until the beneficiary reaches the age of majority, the trust shall be managed exclusively by his legal guardians Marcus and Tiffany King. The trustees shall have full discretionary power to liquidate, sell, or leverage assets as they deem necessary for the health, education, and maintenance of the beneficiary. There it was, the trap. Full discretionary power. That meant they could sell the apartment buildings tomorrow, take the cash, and claim it was for Malik's maintenance. They could buy a Ferrari and say it was to drive Malik to school. They could pay off the Russian loan sharks and say it was to protect the family. It was a license to steal. I looked at Marcus. He was staring at the table, refusing to meet my eyes. Tiffany was staring at me, her eyes wide and hungry. "Is this what you want, Dad?" Marcus asked quietly. "To provide for Malik." "Yes," I whispered, letting a tear roll down my cheek. "For Malik. I want him to be safe." "Then sign it," Tiffany said. Her voice was too loud, too eager. I reached for the pen Gable was holding out. "Hold on," Denzel said. His voice cracked through the tension like a whip. Everyone froze. "I need to review the document," Denzel said calmly. "As Mr. King's personal counsel, I cannot allow him to sign a document I haven't vetted." Gable bristled. "I sent you the draft this morning by courier, Mr. Washington." "I received a draft," Denzel said, reaching out a hand the size of a shovel. "I want to make sure this is the same document. Standard procedure." Tiffany looked like she was about to scream. Marcus looked terrified. If Denzel read Clause 4 too closely, he might object. He might cause a scene. "It is standard procedure," Marcus said quickly, putting a hand on Tiffany's arm. "Let him read it." Gable handed the document to Denzel. Denzel took it. He didn't read it quickly. He took his time. He turned every page. He adjusted his glasses. He hummed and hawed. The silence in the room was excruciating. I could hear the clock ticking on the wall. Tick-tock, tick-tock. While Denzel was reading, I decided to create the distraction, the diversion we had planned. I started to cough. It started as a dry hack, then escalated into a full-blown fit. I grabbed my chest. I knocked my spoon off the table. "Water!" I gasped. "Oh, God," Marcus said, jumping up. He ran to the kitchen. Tiffany stood up, looking panicked. "Is he okay?" Gable asked, half rising from his chair. In that moment of chaos, with Marcus in the kitchen and Tiffany and Gable looking at me, Denzel moved. It was beautiful. It was a move worthy of a Las Vegas magician. Denzel had a folder of his own on the table identical to Gable's. In one smooth motion, while everyone was watching me wheeze, he slid Gable's document under his folder and slid his own document on top. It took less than a second. By the time Marcus ran back in with a glass of water, the switch was done. The document sitting on the table looked exactly the same. Blue cover, thick paper, same font. But the words inside were very, very different. I drank the water, my hands shaking, spilling some on my chin. Marcus wiped it away with a napkin. "I am okay," I wheezed. "I am okay. Just... let's finish this." Denzel handed the document back to me. He looked me right in the eye. "It looks in order, Otis," he said. "It reflects your wishes perfectly." I knew what that meant. Denzel had drafted a will that did leave everything to Malik. But Clause 4 was different. In Denzel's version, the trust was not managed by Marcus and Tiffany. It was managed by a third-party executor, a bank. And the assets were frozen. They couldn't be sold. They could only generate income. If I signed this, Marcus and Tiffany would get nothing. No power to sell. No power to leverage. Just a small monthly allowance for Malik's school fees paid directly to the school. They would be locked out. And the loan sharks would be waiting. I picked up the pen. Marcus and Tiffany leaned in. They were practically vibrating. They were watching the pen tip. They thought they were watching their salvation. They thought they were watching $4 million flow into their pockets. I signed my name, Otis J. King. My signature was shaky but legible. I sat back, dropping the pen. "It is done," I whispered. "Thank you, Dad," Marcus said. He sounded like he was about to cry from relief. "You have no idea what this means." "Oh, I think I do, son," I thought. "I think I know exactly what this means." Tiffany snatched the document before the ink was even dry. "We need to get this notarized and filed," she said to Gable, immediately. "We will take care of it," Mrs. King, Gable said, tucking the document into his briefcase. He stood up, looking relieved to be leaving. Denzel stood up too. He towered over Gable. "I will walk you out, counsel," Denzel said. He looked at me one last time. He gave me a wink. A tiny, imperceptible wink. "Rest well, Otis," Denzel said. "I will call you later to check in." They left the room. I heard the front door close. I was alone with my son and his wife. They were hugging, actually hugging. Tiffany was kissing Marcus on the cheek. "We did it," she whispered. "We are safe." Marcus looked at me. He had a smile on his face, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You should sleep, Dad," he said. "You look exhausted." "I am," I said truthfully. "I am very tired, Marcus." I stood up, refusing his help this time. I walked to the stairs. "I am going to take a long nap," I said. "Don't disturb me." I climbed the stairs, feeling their eyes on my back. They were looking at a dead man walking. They were already mentally redecorating my house. They were already spending my money. I walked into my bedroom and locked the door. I walked over to the window and watched them in the driveway. They were high-fiving. They were laughing. "Laugh while you can," I whispered. I picked up my phone. I saw a text from Denzel. "The shark has bitten. The document they have is the decoy. The real will is filed at the courthouse. And by the way, I put a rush on the toxicology report from the lab. It is ready." I sat down on my bed. The house was quiet again. But it wasn't the silence of a tomb anymore. It was the silence of a courtroom before the gavel comes down. I had the recording. I had the witness video from the hospital. I had the pills. And now I had the legal trap sprung tight around their ankles. It was time for the final act. It was time for the party. I closed my eyes, but I didn't sleep. I started planning the guest list. I was going to throw a celebration for my recovery, and everyone was invited. The police, the loan sharks, and my loving family. The whiskey didn't kill me, Marcus, but the hangover is going to kill you. The sound of a champagne cork popping is usually a sound of joy. It reminds me of weddings, of christenings, of the day I paid off the mortgage on my first building. But lying in my bed upstairs, listening to that pop echo through the floorboards, it sounded like a gunshot. It was followed by laughter, the tinkling of crystal glasses, and the low hum of expensive jazz. My son and his wife were throwing a party. It wasn't a birthday party. It wasn't an anniversary. It was a wake. A wake for a man who was still breathing in the room directly above them. They thought I was asleep, drifting away into a chemical fog, never to wake up again. They thought the ink on that decoy will was dry, and that the deed to my empire was already in their pockets. They were celebrating their victory. They were drinking to my death. I sat up on the edge of the bed. My body felt heavy, not from age or sickness, but from the sheer weight of the betrayal. I looked at the clock. It was 7 in the evening. The sun had set, and the streetlights were casting long shadows across my room. I stood up. My knees popped, but they held. I walked to the mirror. The man looking back at me was tired. His eyes were rimmed with red. His skin looked papery. But behind those eyes, the fire was still burning. I wasn't going to go down there in my pajamas. I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of seeing a frail, old invalid. If this was going to be my last stand, I was going to look like the king they were trying to dethrone. I opened my closet. I pushed aside the cardigans and the slacks. I reached for the garment bag in the back. Inside was my navy blue bespoke suit. I hadn't worn it since I retired from the City Inspection Bureau. It was Italian wool cut to fit me when I was in my prime. I put on a crisp white shirt. I tied my tie a Windsor knot, perfect and tight. I slipped on the jacket. It was a little loose around the waist now, but the shoulders still fit. I looked like a man who commanded respect. I looked like the man who built this house, not the man dying in it. I walked to the door. I could hear Tiffany's voice drifting up the stairs. She was loud, shrill with excitement. To the future, she shouted. To new beginnings and endless possibilities. Here, here, a chorus of voices replied. I opened the bedroom door. The noise got louder. I recognized some of the voices. There was Greg Marcus's college roommate who never held a job for more than 6 months. There was Sheila Tiffany's friend who sold overpriced candles and looked at me like I was a piece of furniture. Vultures. All of them. I walked to the top of the stairs. I placed my hand on the banister. It was solid oak. I had sanded and stained it myself 30 years ago. I felt the grain under my palm. This was my house, my castle, and it was infested. I started to descend. I didn't sneak. I walked with a heavy, deliberate tread. Step, step, step. I reached the landing where the staircase turned. From here I could see the living room. It was transformed. They had moved the furniture, There were platters of catered food on the table, my dining table. There were bottles of Dom Perignon on ice. Tiffany was standing in the center of the room holding a flute of champagne. She was wearing a red dress. Red, the color of blood, the color of celebration. She looked radiant, flushed with the intoxication of greed. Marcus was beside her, looking a little more subdued. His tie loosened a glass of scotch in his hand. "We are going to list the South Side buildings next week," Tiffany was saying to Sheila. "We already have a buyer lined up, a developer who wants to tear them down and build condos. It is going to be a gold mine." "But what about Otis?" Sheila asked, looking around nervously. "Is he—" Tiffany waved her hand dismissively. "He is upstairs resting. The doctor says it won't be long now. He signed everything over to us this morning. He knows it is time to let go. He is ready to move on. Move on. Die." That is what she meant. I took another step. The floorboard creaked, a loud, sharp groan of wood. Greg looked up. He dropped his cracker. Sheila gasped. The room fell silent. One by one, heads turned toward the stairs. The jazz music seemed to fade into the background. I stood on the bottom step, my hand resting casually on the newel post. I stood tall, my spine straight, my chin up. I wasn't the hunched-over, wheezing old man from this morning. I was Otis King. "Hello, everyone," I said. My voice was calm, deep, and steady. It carried across the room without effort. Tiffany dropped her glass. It hit the hardwood floor and shattered. Champagne and shards of crystal exploded around her red heels. She didn't move. She stared at me, her mouth hanging open, her face draining of color so fast she looked like a corpse in a red dress. Marcus choked on his drink. He started coughing, hacking loudly, staring at me with wide, terrified eyes. "Dad," he wheezed. I stepped off the stairs and walked into the room. The guests parted like the Red Sea. They looked uncomfortable, confused. They had been told I was on my deathbed, barely conscious. Yet here I was, dressed for a board meeting, walking with a steady gait. "I am sorry to interrupt," I said, smiling politely at Sheila. "I hope I am not crashing the party." I heard a toast. Something about new beginnings. Tiffany found her voice. It was a high-pitched squeak. "Otis, we thought you were sleeping. The doctor said I needed rest." I finished for her, and I had a wonderful rest. Amazing what a few hours of sleep can do. I feel rejuvenated. In fact, I haven't felt this good in years. I walked over to the table with the champagne. I picked up a bottle and looked at the label. 1998, I read. An excellent vintage. A bit expensive for a Tuesday night, isn't it? But I suppose you are celebrating something special. I looked directly at Marcus. He was trembling. He knew that if I was walking and talking, the pills hadn't worked, or I hadn't taken them. We were just having a few friends over," Marcus stammered. To support us, while you are sick." "Sick?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. I turned to the guests. "Do I look sick to you, Greg?" Greg looked at his shoes. "No, Mr. King. You look great." "Exactly," I said. I turned back to Tiffany. "I felt a little woozy this morning," I admitted. "Probably something I ate. But then I woke up this evening and my chest felt clear. My head felt sharp. I took my blood pressure. Perfect. It seems reports of my demise have been greatly exaggerated." I saw the realization hit Tiffany like a physical blow. Her eyes darted to the calendar on the wall. Tuesday. The foreclosure was next Tuesday. If I wasn't dying, if I wasn't incapacitated, if I wasn't dead by the weekend, the will didn't matter. The power of attorney didn't matter. I was still the owner. I was still in control. And that meant she had exactly 7 days before the bank took her house and the Russians came for her husband's knees. She started to hyperventilate. Her chest heaved. But the will," she whispered. "You signed the will. You said you wanted to let go." "I did sign a will, didn't I?" I said cheerfully. "To protect Malik, to make sure his future is secure. And I meant every word. But a will only works when you are dead. Tiffany." And as you can see, my heart is beating just fine. Strong as an ox, actually. My cardiologist says I could live another 20 years. 20 years. I saw the numbers sink into her brain. 20 years of waiting. 20 years of poverty. She swayed on her feet. Marcus had to grab her elbow to keep her upright. That is great news, Dad," Marcus lied. His voice sounded like he was chewing on glass. "We are so happy. Are you?" I asked. my voice dropping an octave, losing its warmth. Are you really, Marcus? Because you look like you just saw a ghost. I walked closer to them. I invaded their personal space. I smelled the fear on them. It smelled sour cutting through the expensive cologne. I continued speaking low, so only they could hear, although the room was so silent a pin drop would have sounded like a cymbal crash. I heard you talking earlier about selling the South Side buildings, about tearing them down. Marcus paled. Dad, I can explain. No need, I said. It is good to have ambition, but you can't sell what isn't yours, son. And as long as I am breathing, those buildings stand, those tenants stay, and my empire remains mine. I turned back to the room. I clapped my hands together. Well, I don't want to spoil your fun. Please enjoy the champagne. It is on my tab, I assume, like everything else in this family. I looked at Tiffany. She was shaking her head slightly, mumbling to herself. No, no, no. I leaned in close to her ear. You threw a party for my death, Tiffany, I whispered. But you forgot to check the pulse. Now, if you will excuse me, I have a phone call to make. I need to check on Robert. I hear he is waking up too. It seems to be a day for miracles. I pulled back and looked at her face. The mention of Robert destroyed her. She knew Robert knew about the bottle. She knew I knew. She realized in that second that the walls were closing in from both sides. I turned on my heel. I walked back toward the stairs. Oh, and Marcus, I called out over my shoulder. He looked up, a broken man. Clean up that broken glass, I said, pointing to the mess at Tiffany's feet. Someone might get hurt, and we wouldn't want any more accidents in this house, would we? I climbed the stairs, step, step, step. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I could feel the panic radiating from the living room like heat from a fire. The party was over. The guests were already checking their watches, sensing the toxicity in the air, looking for the exit. I reached the top of the landing and walked into my room. I closed the door and leaned against it. My legs finally gave way. I slid down to the floor, my heart pounding in my chest. It wasn't as strong as I claimed, but it was strong enough. I listened. Downstairs, the music had stopped. I heard the front door opening and closing rapidly as guests fled. Then I heard the screaming start. It was Tiffany. She was screaming at Marcus. A primal, terrified sound. What do we do? She shrieked. What do we do? He is not dying. We are going to lose everything. I sat on the floor of my bedroom in my bespoke suit and I smiled. You are not going to lose everything, I thought. You are going to lose more than that. You are going to lose your freedom. I pulled my phone from my pocket. It was time for the final push. The cornered rat is the most dangerous, and tonight Tiffany would be dangerous. She would try one last desperate thing. She had to. She had run out of options, and I was ready for it. I stood up and walked to the window. I looked down at the street. The guests were driving away. The stage is cleared, I said. Now bring on the villain. The silence that falls over a house after a scream is heavier than lead. It presses down on your chest and makes it hard to breathe. I was sitting on the floor of my bedroom, my back against the locked door, listening to the aftermath of the party that was supposed to be my wake. Downstairs, the front door had finally clicked shut behind the last terrified guest. The music was gone. The laughter was gone. All that remained was the low, vibrating tension of two people who had just realized they were trapped in a cage of their own making. I didn't need the listening device anymore. Their voices carried through the vents, amplified by the hollowness of the house. Tiffany wasn't whispering. She was pacing the living room, her heels clicking on the hardwood like the ticking of a bomb. You are useless, she hissed. Her voice was jagged, tearing at the air. You stood there and let him humiliate us. You let him drink our champagne and laugh in our faces. What was I supposed to do? Tiff. Marcus's voice was a whine, pathetic and broken. He is awake. He is fine. The pills didn't work. Maybe the doctor gave us a placebo. Maybe he messed up. The doctor didn't mess up, she snapped. The old man is playing us. I saw his eyes. Marcus, he knows. He knows everything. He doesn't know, Marcus pleaded. He is just lucky. He is tough. Luck doesn't pay the Russians, Marcus. She screamed this time, and I heard the sound of glass shattering. She must have thrown another bottle. We have 6 days. 6 days until they come for the house. 6 days until your kneecaps get shattered. Do you understand? We are dead. We are literally dead unless we get that inheritance. I closed my eyes. I could imagine her face twisted and ugly, the mask of the socialite completely melted away to reveal the desperate predator underneath. "So what do we do?" Marcus asked. His voice was barely a whisper. "We stop playing games," she said. The tone of her voice dropped. It became cold, flat, and terrifyingly calm. "We stop waiting for pills to work. We stop waiting for nature. We help nature along. No tiff." "Yes, Marcus. Tonight. It has to be tonight. Or tomorrow morning at the latest. He is going to drive to the clinic tomorrow for a checkup, right? He said he was going to see Dr. Thorne again." "Yeah. Then he never makes it to the clinic." I felt a chill crawl up my spine that had nothing to do with the drafty window. I pulled my knees to my chest. I was listening to my own murder being planned. "Push him down the stairs," she suggested. "Go up there right now. Break the door down. Say he fell. He is 70. Hips break, necks break. It happens all the time. I can't—" Marcus sobbed. "I can't look him in the eye and do it. I can't push him, Tiff. He is my dad." "Oh, spare me the sentimental garbage," she spat. "You tried to poison him yesterday. You are already a killer, Marcus. You just haven't finished the job. I can't do the stairs. It is too messy. The police, the autopsy, the bruising." "Then the car," she said. The room went silent. "The Ford," she whispered. "That old rust bucket he loves so much. He drives it every day. He's going to drive it tomorrow." "What about it?" "Cut the lines, Marcus." I stopped breathing. "My Ford. My 1970 Ford F100. Restored with my own hands. I taught Marcus how to change the oil on that truck. I taught him how to drive stick shift in that truck in the empty parking lot of the church." "Cut the brake lines," she continued, her voice gaining speed. "It is clean. He drives down the hill on 47th Street. He hits the brakes at the intersection. The pedal goes to the floor. He crashes. Boom! Tragedy. Old man loses control of vehicle. Mechanical failure. No autopsy needed. Just a sad accident." Marcus was silent. I could hear him pacing. I don't know if I can." "Do you want to die, Marcus?" she asked. "Because if you don't do this, the loan sharks will kill you, and they will take your time doing it. Do you want to be buried in a shallow grave, or do you want to be a millionaire? It is a binary choice. Him or us." There was a long pause, a pause that stretched into eternity. I prayed. I prayed to God, to my late wife Sarah, to anyone who was listening. "Please, son, say no. Walk away, leave her. Come upstairs and confess. I will help you. I will pay the debt. Just don't do this." "Okay," Marcus whispered. The word was soft, but it hit me like a sledgehammer. "Okay, go," she commanded. "Do it now. Everyone is asleep. The neighbors are gone. Do it before he wakes up." I heard the back door open. I heard the screen door slam. I didn't move for a moment. I felt paralyzed by a grief so profound it felt like physical sickness. My son had just agreed to sentence me to a violent death. But I couldn't stay paralyzed. I had to witness it. I needed the proof. The poison was circumstantial. The pills were flushed. The will was a decoy. But this sabotaging a vehicle, this was attempted murder in the first degree. I crawled over to my desk. My legs wouldn't support me. I pulled myself up into the chair and woke up the computer monitor. I have cameras everywhere. I am a building inspector. I know that security is about blind spots, and my garage has no blind spots. I clicked on camera 4, the garage interior. The feed flickered to life in sharp, high-definition black and white. My truck was there, my beautiful cherry red Ford. It sat under the single overhead bulb gleaming in the shadows. It was a member of the family, and now it was the weapon. The side door of the garage opened. Marcus stepped inside. He was wearing a hoodie pulled up over his head. He looked like a thief. He looked like a stranger. He was carrying a flashlight in one hand and a pair of heavy-duty wire cutters in the other. He stopped by the workbench. He looked at the truck. He hesitated. I leaned closer to the screen, tears blurring my vision. "Stop, Marcus. Look at that truck. Remember the road trips? Remember when we drove to the Grand Canyon? Remember when you cried because you scratched the paint and I told you it was okay, that scars give character?" He reached out and touched the hood of the truck. His hand lingered on the chrome emblem. For a second, I thought he was going to turn around. I thought the memory was too strong. But then he reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He looked at the screen. Probably a text from Tiffany, a reminder, a threat. He put the phone away. His shoulders slumped. He hardened his resolve. He walked to the front left wheel. He knelt down. He shined the flashlight into the wheel well. I watched as my son lay on the cold concrete floor. I watched him slide under the chassis of the truck. All I could see were his legs sticking out, wearing the expensive sneakers I had bought him for Christmas last year. The camera had a microphone, but it wasn't sensitive enough to pick up the breathing. but it picked up the sound. Snip. It was a small sound, a sharp metallic bite, but to me it sounded like a guillotine. Snip. He cut the primary line. Then a few seconds later, snip. The backup line. I saw a dark liquid start to pool on the concrete near the tire. Brake fluid. The lifeblood of the stopping mechanism. It spread slowly, a black stain growing in the silence. Marcus slid out from under the truck. He stood up. He wiped the fluid from his hands onto his jeans. He looked at the puddle. He kicked some sawdust over it to hide the leak just enough so I wouldn't notice it during a walk around, but not enough to stop the failure. He looked at the camera. He didn't know it was there. He was looking right at me through the lens, through the wires into my soul. His face was wet. He was crying. He was crying while he killed me. I put my hand over my mouth to stifle a sob. It wasn't a sob of fear. It was the sound of a father's heart breaking into a million jagged pieces. It hurt more than the heart attack. It hurt more than losing Sarah. This was the end, the final betrayal. There was no going back from this. Poison could be explained away as a mistake. A bad will could be explained as greed. But cutting the brakes, that is an execution. That is an act of war. Marcus turned and walked out of the garage. He turned off the light, plunging the truck back into darkness. I sat in the dark of my study, the image of the sawdust-covered puddle burned into my retinas. I let the tears flow. I let them soak my shirt. I mourned. I mourned the little boy with the scraped knees. I mourned the teenager who wanted to be an astronaut. I mourned the young man who graduated law school. They were all dead. Marcus had killed them all tonight along with his father. I reached out and saved the video file. I named it The End. Then I wiped my face. I blew my nose. The grief was done. The mourning was over. Tomorrow I had to drive that truck. I had to get into that death trap and turn the key. I had to play the game to its explosive conclusion. I picked up my phone and sent a text to Denzel. It is done. The brakes are cut. I have the video. Call the police chief. Tell him to have units on standby at the intersection of 47th and King Drive tomorrow morning at 9. I am going to give them a show. I stared at the black screen. You want a crash, Marcus? I whispered to the empty room. You want a tragedy? I will give you a tragedy. But it won't be mine. I stood up and walked to the window looking down at the garage. Sleep well, son. Because tomorrow you are going to learn that when you cut the brakes on a man like Otis King, you don't stop him. You just make him unstoppable. The sun rose over Chicago like a bruised eye, purple and gray and swollen. It was Wednesday morning, Judgment Day. I stood in my kitchen drinking coffee from a chipped mug, looking out at the garage. My hands were steady. My heart was calm. It is a strange feeling to wake up on the day of your own murder. Most people don't get to schedule their death. They don't get to dress for it. But I did. I put on my work boots, the ones with the steel toes. I put on my old canvas jacket, the one that smells like sawdust and motor oil. I wanted to look like myself. If this was going to be the last image my son had of me, I wanted him to remember the father who worked. The father who built things, not the helpless old man he thought he was killing. I walked out to the garage. The air was cold, biting at my exposed skin. I hit the button, and the garage door rumbled open. There she was. My 1970 Ford F100, cherry red paint chrome bumper shining under the single bulb. She was beautiful. I had bought her the year Marcus was born. I had restored her bolt by bolt. We had grown old together, and now she was going to be the sacrifice. I walked around to the driver's side. I looked down at the concrete floor. Marcus had kicked sawdust over the puddle of brake fluid, but I could see the dark stain seeping through. A sloppy job, an amateur job. If I had been a real inspector grading his work, I would have failed him on the spot. But today I wasn't grading him. I was trapping him. I opened the door and climbed in. The leather seat creaked, welcoming me home. I put the key in the ignition. I paused. I looked at the passenger seat. I remembered driving Marcus to his first baseball game in this truck. I remembered him crying when he struck out and me telling him that failure is just a brick you use to build the next success. I wondered when he stopped building and started destroying. I turned the key. The engine roared to life. A deep throat rumble that shook the frame. I pulled my phone out of my pocket. I opened the tracking app. I knew they were watching. I knew Tiffany was sitting in her kitchen, probably holding her breath, staring at the little blue dot that represented my life. "I am coming, Marcus," I whispered. I put the truck in gear and backed out. The plan was simple. Dangerous, but simple. I wasn't going to drive down the hill on 47th Street. That was suicide. I had arranged a rendezvous with the police 3 blocks before the steep decline. But to get there, I had to drive. And I had to drive a truck with no brakes. I kept it slow. 10 miles an hour. I used the emergency brake and the gears to control the speed. I drove through my neighborhood. Mrs. Higgins was walking her dog. She waved. I waved back. She didn't know she was waving at a ghost. I reached the corner of 44th and King Drive. A police cruiser was waiting in the alley. 2 officers stepped out. One of them was Chief Miller, my old friend. He looked grim. "Ready, Otis?" he asked. I patted the dashboard of the truck. "One last time." "Ready," I said. I got out. A stunt driver from the police academy, a young kid in full protective gear, climbed in. He looked at me with respect. "We will make it look real, Mr. King," he said. I watched him drive my truck away. I got into the back of Miller's cruiser. We followed at a distance. We watched as the truck turned onto 47th Street. The hill is steep there, a long, winding descent that ends in a sharp curve with a thick line of oak trees guarding a ravine. It is a dangerous road even with good brakes. Without them, it is a death trap. The stunt driver accelerated. He had to make the speed match the GPS data. 40 miles an hour. 50. I watched my truck pick up speed. I saw the brake lights flare. Once, twice, the distress signal. Then I saw the swerve. The driver jerked the wheel at the last second, aiming for the gap between the guardrail and the big oak. He bailed out, rolling onto the grass in a practice maneuver just seconds before impact. The truck didn't stop. It flew. For a second, it was airborne, a ton of red steel against the gray sky. Then gravity took over. It smashed into the trunk of a massive oak tree. The sound was sickening. Metal screaming glass shattering a crunch that felt like it cracked my own ribs. The hood crumpled like paper. Steam hissed from the radiator. The truck spun and slid halfway down the embankment, coming to rest against a rock. Silence. Then the birds started singing again, oblivious to the violence. I sat in the cruiser, staring at the wreckage. My truck. My memories. Destroyed. "That could have been me," Miller said softly. "Yes," I said. "That is exactly what my son wanted." Miller picked up his radio. "Dispatch, we have a confirmed 1050 at 47th and King. Vehicle is totaled. Driver is critical. Send EMS and fire." The radio crackled. "Copy that." "Now we wait," Miller said. "We wait for the reaction." We didn't have to wait long. Back at Marcus's house, the scene was playing out exactly as Tiffany had scripted it. But I didn't need to guess. I had the audio from the bug in Marcus's car, which was parked in their driveway, and Denzel had a contact inside the phone company who was monitoring their data usage. Tiffany saw the blue dot stop. She saw the speed go from 50 to 0 instantly. "He crashed," she screamed. I could hear it in my mind. Marcus, I imagined, was staring at his phone, his hands shaking. He wouldn't be cheering. He would be feeling the phantom impact. He would be hearing the crunch of metal in his head. 10 minutes later, Miller's phone rang. It was the dispatch. "Next of kin has been notified via the emergency contact listed on the registration. Marcus King, he is on his way to the hospital." "Let's go," Miller said. They drove me to the hospital through the back entrance. They sneaked me into a private room in the ICU, the same ICU where Robert was recovering. They hooked me up to monitors, but they didn't turn them on. They put a bandage around my head. They tore my shirt. They made me look like a man who had gone 10 rounds with a freight train. Then I lay there and waited. I heard them coming down the hallway before they even opened the door. Tiffany's heels. Click, click, click. Fast. Urgent. Marcus's footsteps were slower. Dragging. The door burst open. "Oh my God!" Tiffany shrieked. It was a performance worthy of an Oscar. She ran to the bedside. "Daddy Otis. Oh, please tell me he is alive." She grabbed my hand. Her skin was warm. Her pulse was racing. But not from grief, from adrenaline, from victory. She looked at the monitor. It was off. Is he dead?" she asked the doctor who was standing by the window. "He is in a coma," the doctor said gravely. "His injuries are severe. Internal bleeding. Head trauma. We are doing everything we can, but what?" Marcus asked from the doorway. He hadn't entered the room. He was leaning against the frame, looking pale green. He looked like he was going to vomit. "But it doesn't look good," the doctor said. You should prepare yourselves. Tiffany buried her face in my chest. I could feel her shaking. She was laughing. She was silently laughing into my shirt. We will stay with him, she sobbed. We won't leave his side. Marcus stepped into the room. He looked at me. He looked at the bruises on my face. He looked at the torn shirt. I did this, he whispered. What? Tiffany snapped, lifting her head sharply. I should have checked the truck, Marcus stammered, covering his slip. He said the brakes felt soft last week. I should have taken it to the shop. It is not your fault, baby, Tiffany said, standing up and hugging him. It was an accident, a terrible, tragic accident. But we are here now. We will take care of everything. She looked over Marcus's shoulder at the doctor. If he passes, what is the procedure? We will need to contact the coroner, the doctor said, and since it was a traffic accident, there will be an investigation. Investigation? Tiffany asked, her voice tightening. Standard procedure, the doctor said, to rule out mechanical failure or foul play. I felt Tiffany stiffen. Of course, she said. But the truck was old. It was probably just rust. Probably, the doctor agreed. I lay there listening to them discuss my autopsy. Marcus pulled away from Tiffany. I need to sit down, he said. He walked to the chair in the corner and collapsed. He put his head between his knees. He was retching, dry, heaving. The guilt was eating him alive. He had crossed the line. He had taken a life. He thought he was a murderer. Tiffany walked over to him. She put a hand on his shoulder. Pull yourself together, she hissed. It is over. We won, are free. The house is saved. Marcus looked up at her. His eyes were hollow. Free, he whispered. I don't feel free, Tiff. I feel like I am in hell. You will feel better when the check clears, she said. Now stand up. The police are coming to take a statement. You need to look sad, not guilty. The police. That was my cue. I heard heavy boots in the hallway. The door opened. Chief Miller walked in. He wasn't smiling. He looked at Marcus. He looked at Tiffany. Mr. and Mrs. King, he asked. Yes, Tiffany said, wiping a fake tear. We are his family. I am Chief Miller. I am sorry to disturb you at a time like this, but I need to ask you a few questions about the accident. Ask anything, Tiffany said. We want to know what happened too. We examined the scene, Miller said. The truck hit the tree at approximately 50 miles per hour. There were no skid marks. No skid marks, Marcus whispered. That means he didn't brake, Miller said. Or he couldn't brake. He was old, Tiffany said quickly. Maybe he had a heart attack. Maybe he passed out before the crash. Maybe, Miller said. But we found something else. What Tiffany asked. We found brake fluid on the garage floor at your father's house, Miller said, and we found fresh tool marks on the brake lines of the wreckage. The room went deadly silent. The air was sucked out of the space. Tool marks, Marcus squeaked. Yes, Miller said, his eyes locking onto Marcus. It looks like someone cut the lines. This wasn't an accident, Mr. King. This was attempted murder. Tiffany gasped. Who would do such a thing? Otis was loved by everyone. We are checking security cameras now, Miller said. Mr. King had a very sophisticated system installed in his garage. We should have the footage within the hour. I felt Tiffany's hand on the bed rail. She was gripping it so hard the metal was creaking. She knew. She realized instantly that the garage had cameras. She realized Marcus had been filmed. Marcus stood up. He was shaking so hard his teeth were chattering. Cameras, he said. Yes, Miller said. If someone cut those lines, we will see their face. We will see exactly who did it. Marcus looked at Tiffany. Panic, pure and unadulterated panic, flooded his eyes. Tiff, he whispered. Shut up, she hissed. I opened my eyes. It was time. I sat up. I pulled the bandage off my head. I sat up straight in the bed, the monitors beeping steadily. You don't need to wait an hour, Chief Miller, I said. My voice was clear, strong, and very, very alive. Marcus screamed. He actually screamed, jumping back and hitting the wall. Tiffany froze. She looked at me like I was a demon rising from the pit. Dad, Marcus whimpered. Hello, son, I said. I see you are upset about the truck. It is a shame. I really love that truck, but not as much as I loved you. Otis, Tiffany stammered, stepping back. You are okay. I am better than okay, Tiffany, I said. I am enlightened. I reached under the pillow and pulled out a tablet. I tapped the screen. The video of Marcus cutting the brake lines started playing. I turned the screen so they could see it. "I watched you do it, Marcus," I said softly. "I watched you crawl under my truck. I watched you cut the lines. I watched you cry. And then I watched you walk away and leave me to die." "No," Marcus sobbed, sliding down the wall to the floor. "No, no, no. And you, Tiffany," I said, turning my gaze to her. "I have a video of you too, visiting your father, threatening him, confessing to the poison." Tiffany looked at the door. She looked at the window. She was looking for a way out. "Don't bother," I said. "The hallway is full of officers." Chief Miller stepped forward. He pulled a pair of handcuffs from his belt. The metallic click was the loudest sound in the world. "Marcus King, Tiffany," King Miller said, "you are under arrest for attempted murder conspiracy to commit murder and elder abuse." I watched as Miller cuffed Marcus. My son didn't fight. He just wept. He looked at me one last time. "Dad," he whispered, "I am sorry." I looked at him. I didn't feel anger anymore. I just felt a deep, terrible sadness. "I know you are son," I said, "but sorry doesn't fix the breaks, and it doesn't fix this family." I lay back on the pillow as they dragged them out. The room was quiet again. I was alive. I was rich. I was safe. But as I looked at the empty doorway, I knew the truth. I was an orphan now too. There is a specific art to playing dead that nobody teaches you. It is not just about holding your breath or lying still. It is about becoming an object. It is about vacating your own body so completely that the people looking at you see furniture instead of a man. I lay in the hospital bed, the sheets pulled up to my chest, a thin plastic tube taped to my nose for effect. The heart monitor next to me was turned off, a black silent screen that screamed finality more than any noise ever could. The room was cold, kept at that sterile temperature that preserves viruses and kills hope. My eyes were closed, but my other senses were dialed up to 11. I could smell the sharp tang of disinfectant and the faint metallic scent of the blood they had fake painted onto my bandages. I could hear the hum of the ventilation system, and most importantly, I could hear the footsteps approaching from the hallway. Dr. Bennett, an old friend of Chief Miller, was playing his part perfectly. He stood by the door, his voice low and grave as he spoke to the people outside. "I am sorry," he said. "We did everything we could. The trauma from the crash was too severe." His heart, it just stopped. I heard a gasp. It was theatrical, loud, and unmistakably Tiffany. "No," she wailed. "Not Otis. Oh God, tell me it is not true." Then I heard a sound that broke my heart all over again. A low, guttural sob. That was Marcus. My son wasn't acting. He believed I was dead. He believed he had killed me. The weight of that guilt was crushing him right there in the hallway. Part of me, the father part, wanted to jump up and hug him to tell him it was a trick. But the inspector part, the part that sought justice, forced me to stay frozen. He needed to feel this. He needed to walk through the valley of the shadow of death to understand what he had done. "You can go in," Dr. Bennett said gently. "Take as much time as you need. I will leave you alone to say your goodbyes." The door opened. The air pressure in the room changed. Tiffany entered first. I could tell by the aggressive click of her heels on the linoleum. She rushed to the bedside, bringing with her a cloud of expensive perfume that smelled like gardenias and greed. She threw herself across my chest. "Daddy," she sobbed, her voice muffled by the hospital blanket. "Oh, Daddy, please wake up." I felt her hands gripping my shoulders. They were digging in, testing for a reaction. She was shaking me, not to wake me, but to verify that I was actually gone. I let my head loll to the side, my jaw slack. I was a rag doll. I was a corpse. Marcus shuffled in behind her. He didn't come close. He stayed near the foot of the bed. I could hear his breathing. It was ragged, hyperventilating. "I killed him," Marcus whispered. His voice was thick with mucus and tears. "I killed my own father." "Hush." Tiffany snapped, her head still buried in my chest. Her voice was muffled, but the tone had changed instantly. It wasn't grief anymore. It was a command. The door clicked shut. Dr. Bennett had left. We were alone. The transformation was immediate and terrifying. Tiffany stopped crying. Just like that. It was as if someone had flipped a switch. She pushed herself up off my chest. She smoothed her hair. She took a deep breath, not of sorrow but of relief. She leaned over me. I could feel her breath on my face. She reached out and 2 fingers pressed against the carotid artery in my neck. Her fingers were cold. She held them there for a long time. I had practiced this. I had practiced shallow breathing, slowing my heart rate down like a monk. But I couldn't stop my pulse completely. However, to an excited, adrenaline-fueled amateur like Tiffany, my slow, faint rhythm probably felt like nothing, or she was too manic to find it. "He is gone," she whispered. Her voice trembled, but this time it was with excitement. "He is actually gone." She turned to Marcus. "Stop crying," she hissed. "It is done." "I can't," Marcus choked out. "Look at him, Tiff. He is dead." I cut the lines. "I murdered him." "You saved us," Tiffany corrected him. She walked over to the foot of the bed, but then she came back to me. She couldn't stay away. She was drawn to my body like a moth to a flame. She needed to gloat. She needed to claim her victory over the enemy who had defied her for so long. She leaned down close to my ear. Her lips brushed against the fake bandage on my forehead. "You stubborn old bastard," she whispered. I lay perfectly still. "You really thought you could win, didn't you?" She continued, her voice a low, venomous purr. "You thought you could keep it all to yourself. You thought you could cut us out." She reached down and patted my cheek. It was a slap disguised as a caress. "I tried to be nice, Otis. I really did. I sent you that whiskey. $2,000 I spent on that bottle. If you had just drunk it like a normal alcoholic, you would have gone to sleep peacefully in your armchair. It would have been dignified." She laughed softly, a dry, humorless sound. "But no, you had to be a hero. You had to give it to my dad. You almost ruined everything. You made me hurt my own father just to clean up your mess." I focused on the darkness behind my eyelids. I focused on the rage burning in my gut. "Keep talking, Tiffany. Dig the hole deeper." And then the truck, she said. "My God, that old rust bucket finally served a purpose. I saw the crash on the news, Otis. It was spectacular. You hit that tree so hard. Well, I guess you didn't feel a thing." She ran her hand down the lapel of the hospital gown as if she were straightening a tie. "It is over now. The bank won't foreclose. The Russians won't break Marcus's legs. Because now we are the sole heirs. The will you signed. Even if it was the decoy, we will contest it. We will say you were incompetent. We will take the buildings. We will take the land. We will take every single dime you hid from us." She leaned in closer until her lips were touching my ear. "The assets are mine, Otis. All of them. And you are just a memory. A bad memory that we are going to bury in a cheap pine box." She pulled back, looking at my face one last time. "Goodbye, Dad," she mocked. This was it. The moment. The payoff. I waited until she turned her back to walk toward Marcus. I waited until she was taking that first step of triumph. Then I opened my eyes. I didn't move my body. I just opened my eyes and stared at the ceiling. "I am not sure about the pine box, Tiffany," I said. My voice was raspy from disuse, but in the silence of that room it sounded like a thunderclap. Tiffany screamed. It wasn't a scream of surprise, it was a scream of primal terror. She jumped back her heels, slipping on the floor, and she fell hard onto her backside. She scrambled backward, crab walking away from the bed, her eyes bulging out of her head. Marcus looked up. His jaw dropped. He stopped breathing. He looked like he was seeing a ghost, which in a way he was. "Dad," he whispered. I sat up. I moved slowly, deliberately. I pulled the oxygen tube off my nose and tossed it aside. I sat on the edge of the bed, my legs dangling. I looked at Tiffany, who was pressed against the wall, shaking violently. "I prefer oak," I said calmly, "for the coffin, if I ever need one. But today is not that day." You are dead," Tiffany shrieked. The doctor said, "The monitor is unplugged, Tiffany," I said, pointing to the loose cord hanging behind the bed. "And the doctor, he is a friend of mine. Unlike Dr. Thorne, Dr. Bennett actually follows the Hippocratic Oath." "Otis," Marcus stammered. He took a step forward, his hand reaching out as if to touch me. "You are alive." I looked at my son. The relief in his eyes was genuine. He wasn't sad that his inheritance was gone. He was happy his father wasn't dead. It was a small redemption, but it was there. "I am alive, son," I said. "Despite your best efforts." I turned my gaze back to Tiffany. She was trying to stand up, clawing at the wall. You set this up," she hissed, her shock turning rapidly into fury. This is entrapment. You can't do this." "I didn't entrap you into cutting my brake lines, Tiffany," I said. "I didn't entrap you into poisoning a bottle of whiskey. And I certainly didn't entrap you into standing over my body and confessing to everything just now." "Who heard you?" she sneered, regaining a shred of her confidence. "It is your word against ours. You are a senile old man who just had a head injury. Nobody will believe you. Marcus won't say anything." She looked at Marcus. "Marcus, tell him. We didn't say anything. He is hallucinating." Marcus looked at her. Then he looked at me. He didn't speak. "It doesn't matter what Marcus says," I said, "because we have a witness." Tiffany looked around the empty room. "There is nobody here." I smiled, a cold, hard smile. "I wouldn't say nobody." I looked toward the bathroom door in the corner of the room. It had been closed the entire time. "Chief," I called out, "did you get all that?" The bathroom door opened. Chief Miller stepped out. He was in full uniform. He was holding a digital recorder in his hand. The red light was blinking steadily. I got every word Otis Miller said. He walked into the center of the room. He looked at Tiffany with an expression of pure disgust. Mrs. King Miller said, "I have heard some cold confessions in my 30 years on the force. But that was ice cold." Tiffany looked at the chief. She looked at the recorder. She looked at me. The color drained from her face completely. Her legs gave out again and she slid back down the wall. "No," she whispered. "This isn't real." "Oh, it is real," Miller said. He reached for his radio. "Officers, come in. Secure the room." The door to the hallway burst open. 2 uniformed officers marched in. They weren't actors. They were the real deal. "Marcus King, Tiffany." King Miller intoned his voice, filling the small room. "You are under arrest for the attempted murder of Otis King, the attempted murder of Robert Evans, conspiracy to commit murder and fraud." Marcus didn't fight. He held his hands out. He was crying again, but this time it was a quiet cry. He looked at me as the officer clicked the handcuffs onto his wrists. "I am sorry, Dad," he whispered. "I am so sorry." I looked at him. I wanted to be angry. I wanted to yell, but all I felt was tired. "I know Marcus," I said softly. Tiffany, however, did not go quietly. As the officer grabbed her arm, she lunged. She didn't lunge at the cop. She lunged at me. "You old devil," she screamed, her face twisted into a mask of hate. "You should have died. Why won't you just die?" The officer slammed her against the wall. "That is enough," Miller shouted. "Get them out of here." They dragged her out, kicking and screaming obscenities. Her voice echoed down the corridor, fading into the distance. The room fell silent again. Miller walked over to the bed. He handed me a handkerchief. I wiped the fake blood from my forehead. "You okay, Otis?" he asked. I took a deep breath. The air smelled of disinfectant, but underneath that it smelled like freedom. "I am alive, Miller," I said. "I am alive." And as I sat there on the edge of the hospital bed listening to the fading sirens of the police cars taking my family away, I realized that for the first time in a long time, the foundation of my life was finally clean. The rot was gone. It had cost me everything to remove it, but at least now I could start rebuilding. The room was spinning for them, but for me, the world had never been steadier. I sat on the edge of that hospital bed, swinging my legs, watching the color drain from Tiffany's face, until she looked like a sheet of drywall. She was backing away from me, her hands trembling in the air as if she were trying to ward off a spirit. And in a way she was. She was looking at the ghost of her own greed, and it was terrifying. "You want to know how I survived, don't you, Marcus?" I asked, my voice cutting through the heavy silence of the room. Marcus was slumped against the wall, his eyes wide and vacant. He couldn't speak. He just nodded, a jerky mechanical motion. "You thought I drove that truck down the hill?" I said, standing up slowly. I walked over to the window and pulled back the blind. Outside, the city of Chicago was bustling, alive, and indifferent to our little family tragedy. "You thought I got into my Ford, the truck I have loved for 30 years, and drove it to my death because I was too senile to check the brakes. But you forgot who I am, son. You forgot that I made a living finding the cracks in things. I made a living seeing what other people missed." I turned back to them. "I didn't drive that truck down the hill, Marcus. A stunt driver from the police academy did, and he didn't die either. He bailed out long before impact. The truck you saw smashed against that oak tree. That was my truck, yes, and it broke my heart to sacrifice it. But metal can be replaced. Blood cannot. Tiffany found her voice then. It was shrill, desperate, the sound of a cornered rat snapping its teeth. "This is illegal!" she screamed, pointing a shaking finger at Chief Miller. "You faked a crime scene. You lied to us. This is entrapment. Any lawyer will throw this out in 5 minutes." Chief Miller just crossed his arms. He looked at her with the kind of pity you save for something you scrape off your shoe. "It is not entrapment to catch a criminal in the act," Mrs. King Miller said calmly. "And we didn't fake a crime. A crime was committed the moment your husband cut those brake lines. The rest was just a controlled demolition. But you have no proof." Tiffany yelled, her eyes darting around the room. "You have the word of a crazy old man and some brake fluid on a garage floor. That is circumstantial. My husband didn't do anything. It was just an old truck. It broke on its own." I sighed. I reached for the remote control on the bedside table. I pointed it at the large television mounted on the wall opposite the bed. "I told you, Tiffany," I said softly. "I am a building inspector. We document everything." I pressed the button. The screen flickered to life. The first image was grainy black and white, but unmistakable. It was the interior of my garage. The timestamp in the corner read 2:15 a.m. Tiffany stopped breathing. Marcus squeezed his eyes shut. On the screen, a figure in a hoodie walked into the frame. He was holding a flashlight. He looked nervous. He looked terrified. He walked up to the cherry-red Ford F-100. He knelt down. "Open your eyes, Marcus," I commanded. My voice wasn't loud, but it had the weight of iron. "Watch this." Marcus didn't move. "Watch it!" I roared. He flinched and opened his eyes. He looked at the screen. He watched himself slide under the truck. The audio on the video was quiet, just the hum of the refrigerator in the garage until the sound came. Snip, the sound of the wire cutters. It echoed in the hospital room louder than a gunshot. Then a few seconds later, snip. I watched Marcus on the screen slide out from under the truck. I watched him wipe the fluid on his jeans. I watched him look directly into the camera lens with tears streaming down his face. I paused the video on that frame, the image of my crying son holding the tool he used to try and kill me. "There is your proof, Tiffany," I said. "That is not circumstantial. That is premeditated attempted murder." Tiffany stared at the screen. Her mouth was opening and closing like a fish out of water. She was calculating. I could see the gears grinding in her head. She was looking for an exit. She was looking for a scapegoat. But I wasn't done. "That is just Act 1, I said. "Let's look at the prologue." I pressed the button again. The video changed. This time the image was from a high angle looking down at a hospital bed. In the bed lay Robert Tiffany's father. Tiffany gasped. "No," she whispered. On the screen, Tiffany walked into the frame. She looked perfect, composed. She leaned down to her paralyzed father. The audio here was crystal clear. Every word she hissed was amplified. "The bottle wasn't meant for you, Daddy. It was meant for Otis. You drank it. If you tell anyone, I will go to prison. Do you want to see me in a cage?" The video played on. It showed her threatening him. It showed her squeezing his hand until he flinched. It showed the monster beneath the makeup. I let it play until the end, until she kissed his forehead and walked out. I turned off the TV. The screen went black, leaving our reflections staring back at us. A father, a son, and a daughter-in-law. A family portrait destroyed. The silence in the room was absolute. Chief Miller stepped forward. He unhooked a second pair of handcuffs from his belt. "That is enough for me," Miller said. He walked toward Tiffany. Tiffany backed into the corner. Her eyes were wild. She looked from the TV to Marcus, and then the dam broke. The facade of the loving wife, the grieving daughter, the sophisticated socialite, it all shattered. "It wasn't me," she screamed. She pointed a manicured finger at Marcus. "It was him. He did it all." Marcus looked up, stunned. "Tiff, he is the one who wanted the money," she shrieked, dodging Miller's hand. "He is the one with the gambling debt. He is the one who owes the Russians. He begged me to help him. I told him no. I told him we shouldn't do it. But he forced me." Marcus stood up slowly. He looked at his wife. He looked at the woman he had tried to kill his father for, the woman he had destroyed his life for. You told me to do it," Marcus whispered. "You said we were dead if I didn't. You handed me the wire cutters, Tiffany." "Liar. she screamed, her face twisted and ugly. "You are a weak, pathetic loser. You couldn't even kill an old man, right? You failed at everything. You failed at business, you failed at marriage, and now you failed at murder." She lunged at him, her nails aiming for his face. Chief Miller caught her. He spun her around and slammed her against the wall. "Tiffany King, you are under arrest!" Miller barked, snapping the cuffs on her wrists. She fought him. She kicked and spat. "Get off me! You can't arrest me. I am a victim here. My husband is a psycho." The officers dragged her toward the door. As she passed me, she lunged again, spitting at my feet. "I hope you rot, Otis," she screamed. "I hope you die alone in that big empty house." They hauled her out. Her screams faded down the corridor, a litany of curses and blame. Then there was only Marcus. He stood in the center of the room, still handcuffed. He was trembling. He looked at the door where his wife had just disappeared. He looked at the TV screen where his crime was frozen in time. And then he looked at me. He didn't look like a killer anymore. He looked like a little boy who had broken a window and knew there was no way to fix it. He looked small. He crumpled. He didn't fall. He just melted. He dropped to his knees on the cold hospital floor. He bowed his head until it touched the linoleum near my feet. "Dad," he sobbed. The sound was raw, a deep, animalistic keen of pure regret. "I am sorry. Oh God, I am so sorry. I didn't want to do it, I swear. I was so scared." I looked down at him, my son, the boy I had held in my arms when he was minutes old, the boy I had taught to fish, the boy I had been so proud of when he graduated college. I felt a tear slide down my own cheek. I didn't wipe it away. I walked over to him. I stood over him. I wanted to reach down and touch his head. I wanted to tell him it was going to be okay. That is what a father does. A father fixes things. But I couldn't fix this. "I can forgive a lot of things, Marcus," I said. My voice was quiet, but it filled the room. "I can forgive you for losing money. I can forgive you for being weak. I can forgive you for not visiting me. I can even forgive you for being ungrateful." Marcus looked up. His face was wet with tears, snot running from his nose. His eyes were begging for absolution. "But I cannot forgive this," I said. I leaned down, looking him right in the eye. "I can forgive the stupidity of a child, Marcus, but I will never, ever forgive a man who tries to kill the father who raised him just to feed the greed of a woman who hates him." Marcus flinched as if I had slapped him. "You chose her, Marcus," I said, straightening up. "You chose the poison. You chose the knife. You chose the money over my life. And now you have to live with that choice." I signaled to the officer standing by the door. "Take him away," I said. "Please." "Dad," Marcus wailed as the officer grabbed his arm and hauled him to his feet. "Don't let them take me. Please, I am your son." I turned my back on him. I looked out the window at the city skyline. "I have no son," I whispered. "My son died the moment he crawled under that truck." I heard the door close. I heard the footsteps fading away. I was alone. The room was silent. The TV screen was dark. The handcuffs were gone. The screaming was gone. I took a deep breath. It hurt. My chest ached with a pain that no medicine could touch. I had won the war. I had saved my life. I had saved my fortune. But as I stood there in the sterile light of the hospital room, I realized the cost of victory. I was the last man standing in the rubble of my own family. I walked over to the chair where Marcus had sat and picked up my jacket. I put it on. I smoothed the lapels. "I am Otis King," I said to the empty room, "and I am still standing." I walked out of the room, leaving the ghosts behind me. I had a house to clean. I had a will to rewrite. And I had a friend named Robert who was going to need a lot of help when he woke up. Life goes on, it has to. Even when it breaks your heart. The gavel in a courtroom doesn't sound like a hammer, it sounds like a door slamming shut. It is a final wooden thud that echoes in your chest and tells you that the inspection is over and the building has been condemned. I sat in the second row of the Cook County Courthouse, my hands folded in my lap, wearing the same navy suit I had worn the night I walked down the stairs to crash my own wake. Next to me sat Robert. He was in a wheelchair, a blanket over his knees. The stroke had left the left side of his face sagging slightly and his left hand curled inward like a claw, but his eyes were sharp. They were the eyes of a man who had looked into the abyss and decided to wheel himself back out. We were two fathers, two victims, two survivors watching our children facing the consequences of their greed. Tiffany stood up first. Even in the orange jumpsuit of the county jail, she tried to maintain an air of superiority. She had fired her public defender 3 times. She had tried to represent herself, turning the trial into a circus of accusations and hysteria. She claimed I was abusive. She claimed Robert was senile. She claimed the video was deep-faked. She threw every lie she could find at the wall, hoping something would stick. But nothing stuck. The evidence was concrete. The video of the brake cutting, the recording of the hospital confession, the testimony of the chemical experts. It was a fortress of facts that no amount of screaming could breach. The judge was a stern woman with glasses perched on the end of her nose. She looked at Tiffany over the rim of those glasses with a mixture of exhaustion and disgust. Tiffany King, the judge, said, her voice dry as dust. You have shown absolutely no remorse. You manipulated your husband, you poisoned your own father, and you plotted the death of your father-in-law. You treated human life like a transaction. It wasn't me. Tiffany shrieked, struggling against the bailiff's grip. It was the old man. He set me up. He is the devil. The judge banged the gavel. For the attempted murder of Robert Evans and the conspiracy to commit murder against Otis King, I sentence you to 20 years in a federal correctional facility. No possibility of parole for the first 15. 20 years. Tiffany stopped screaming. Her knees buckled. She looked back at the gallery. She looked for someone to save her. She looked at her father. "Daddy," she wailed. "Daddy, please, tell them I am a good girl." Robert didn't speak. He couldn't speak quickly anymore. His words were slow and hard-won. But he did something louder than any speech. He reached out with his good hand and unlocked the brake on his wheelchair. He slowly, deliberately turned his back to her. He rolled himself toward the exit door, refusing to look at the woman who had traded his life for a down payment. It was the coldest, most necessary thing I have ever seen. Tiffany was dragged out her heels, dragging on the floor, her screams turning into animalistic howls that faded as the heavy steel door clanged shut. Then it was Marcus's turn. My son stood up. He looked smaller than I had ever seen him. He had lost weight in jail. His suit hung off his shoulders. He didn't look at the judge. He didn't look at the gallery. He stared at his shoes. He had pleaded guilty. He hadn't fought. He had confessed to everything in a quiet, monotone voice during the deposition. Mr. King, the judge, said, her tone softening just a fraction. You were under extreme duress and you have cooperated with the prosecution. However, you held the wire cutters. You made the choice to act. Weakness is not a defense for attempted murder. I know, Marcus whispered. I sentence you to 15 years, the judge said. 15 years. He would be 50 years old when he got out. His youth, his potential, his future all gone, because he couldn't say no to a woman who wanted a lifestyle he couldn't afford. Marcus turned around then. He looked for me. Our eyes locked. I saw the little boy who used to wait for me on the porch when I came home from work. I saw the teenager I taught to shave. And I saw the man who had tried to kill me. I stood up. I didn't smile. I didn't wave. I just nodded. It was a nod of acknowledgement. A nod that said, I am still here. I am watching. But I cannot save you from this. He nodded back, tears streaming down his face. Then the bailiff took his arm and my son walked through the door into the darkness of the system. I walked out of the courthouse pushing Robert's wheelchair. The sun was shining outside, bright and offensive. It felt wrong that the world was still turning when my family had just ceased to exist. We need coffee, Robert mumbled, his speech slurring slightly. Strong coffee. I know a place, I said. We sat in a diner, 2 old men with broken hearts drinking black coffee and not saying much. There wasn't much to say. The war was over. We had won, but the victory tasted like ash. A week later, the financial fallout hit the ground. With both of them in prison, the mortgage on Marcus and Tiffany's house went into default immediately. The bank didn't waste time. They posted the foreclosure notice on the front door. The loan sharks, realizing their targets were now property of the state and beyond their reach, vanished into the shadows, cutting their losses. The house went up for auction on a rainy Tuesday. I went to the auction. It was a McMansion in the suburbs, big, gaudy, with fake columns and cheap stucco. It was the symbol of everything that had gone wrong with them. It was a house built on debt, filled with things they didn't need, bought with money they didn't have. I stood in the back of the crowd of investors and flippers. I listened to the auctioneer rattle off numbers. 300,000, 350, 400. I raised my paddle. 500,000, I said. Cash. The room went silent. The other bidders looked at me. They saw an old man in a work jacket. They didn't know I was the father of the man who lost it. They didn't know I was buying the tomb of my son's life, sold, the auctioneer yelled. I walked up and wrote the check. It was a lot of money. But I had a plan. I wasn't going to flip it. I wasn't going to live in it. I couldn't live in a house where the walls whispered about greed. I hired a crew the next day. We gutted it. We tore out the marble countertops that Tiffany loved. We tore out the wine cellar. We tore out the home theater. We put in sturdy bunk beds. We put in a commercial kitchen capable of feeding 50 people. We put in a counseling office. We turned the master bedroom, the room where they had plotted my murder, into a playroom for children. I called it Hope House. It took 3 months to finish the renovation. When we opened the doors, it was a shelter for homeless families, specifically for fathers who had fallen on hard times and were trying to keep their children together. Men who had made mistakes, men who had lost their way, but men who were willing to work to get back on their feet. I remember the day we opened. It was a crisp autumn morning. A young man named David walked in holding the hand of his 5-year-old daughter. He looked tired. He looked beaten down by the world. He looked a little bit like Marcus did before the greed took him. "Welcome," I said, shaking his hand at the door. "Is this real?" David asked, looking around at the clean, warm space. "I heard this used to be a rich guy's house." "It used to be a house of lies," I said. "Now it is a house of truth. You are safe here, son," David cried. He hugged his daughter, and I saw the look in his eyes. It was gratitude. It was dignity. That night I sat in the office of Hope House looking at the plaque on the wall. It read, "Dedicated to the rebuilding of broken foundations." I had spent my life inspecting buildings looking for faults. I couldn't fix the fault line in my own son. I couldn't retrofit his character. But I could build something new on the ruins of his failure. I drove home that night to my own empty house. It was quiet, but it wasn't lonely anymore. I had Robert. I had the men at Hope House. And I had the peace of knowing that while my bloodline had failed me, my legacy would not. I sat in my armchair, the one where I had opened the whiskey bottle. I poured myself a glass of iced tea. To justice, I whispered to the empty room, and to the hard work of starting over. The phone rang. It was Robert. "Otis," he said, his voice stronger than it had been in weeks. "Are you watching the game? I am turning it on now, Robert," I said. I picked up the remote. Life went on. It had to. The inspection was complete. The debris was cleared. And now it was time to just live. The water of Lake Michigan has a way of washing things clean if you sit by it long enough. It is a Saturday morning, 1 year to the day since the trial ended. The air is crisp, carrying the scent of pine and deep water. I'm sitting on a folding canvas chair at the end of the pier, a fishing rod in my hand. Beside me in his motorized wheelchair sits Robert. He looks different now. The stroke left its mark, pulling the left side of his mouth down slightly, and his left hand rests uselessly in his lap. But his eyes are bright. They are the eyes of a man who woke up from a nightmare and realized he was still breathing. He is holding a rod with his good hand, staring intently at the bobber dancing on the gentle waves. We don't talk much. We don't need to. We are two old veterans of a war that was fought in living rooms and courtrooms instead of battlefields. We are the survivors of our own children. It has been a busy year. The Hope House project took on a life of its own. It started as a way to scrub the stain of Marcus and Tiffany off that property, but it became something else. It became a home. Every day I see men walking through those doors who have lost their way, men who made mistakes but are fighting to be better fathers than my son ever was. Watching them rebuild their lives has helped me rebuild my own. It taught me that legacy isn't about bloodlines. It is about the impact you leave on the world. My phone buzzed in my pocket earlier this morning, but I ignored it. I have a new rule. No business on weekends. Saturdays are for fishing. Saturdays are for peace. But I do have something in my pocket that has been burning a hole in my jacket since yesterday. I reached in and pulled out a white envelope. The return address was stamped in red ink, Stateville Correctional Center. Inmate number 48293, Marcus. It is the 5th letter he has sent this month. The first 4 were full of excuses. He blamed Tiffany, he blamed the pills, he blamed the pressure, he never once blamed himself. Robert glanced over at the envelope. He knew what it was. He gave a small grunt, a sound of dismissal, and turned his attention back to the water. Robert hasn't spoken Tiffany's name in 6 months. To him, she died the day she threatened him in that hospital bed. He has found a new family in the nurses who care for him, and in the Sunday dinners we share at my house. I looked at the letter. My thumb traced the edge of the paper. I knew what was inside before I even opened it. But old habits die hard. A father always hopes. A father always looks for that one sentence that says, "I love you, Dad, and I am sorry." I tore it open. I unfolded the cheap, rough paper. The handwriting was cramped and messy. "Dear Dad," it began. "Hope you are good. Listen, things are tight in here. The food is garbage. I need some money for the commissary. Can you put 500 on my books? Also, I need a new lawyer. This guy is useless on the appeal. I know you have the money. Don't be like that." I stopped reading. There was no inquiry about my health, no question about how Robert was doing, no mention of the fact that it was the anniversary of the day he tried to kill me. Just gimme, gimme, gimme. He hadn't changed. Prison hadn't broken him. It had just made him desperate. He still saw me as a wallet. He still saw me as a resource to be mined until it was empty. I looked out at the vast blue horizon. A seagull dipped low, skimming the water. For a long time I carried the guilt of Marcus's failure. I thought I had failed to teach him right from wrong. I thought I had loved him too much or not enough. But sitting here feeling the sun on my face, I realized the truth. You can build the strongest foundation in the world, but you can't force the house to stand if the wood is rotten. Marcus was who he was, and I was who I was. I am Otis King. I am a builder. I am a survivor, and I am done being a victim. I didn't fold the letter back up. I didn't put it in my pocket. I tore it in half. The sound was sharp and satisfying, like a dry twig snapping. Then I put the halves together and tore them again and again, until the words, "Money Lawyer Books Dad," were nothing but confetti in my hand. I opened my hand over the water. The wind caught the pieces. They fluttered down like snow-white flakes, drifting onto the dark surface of the lake. They floated for a second, then soaked up the water and sank, disappearing into the depths. "What was that?" Robert asked, his voice raspy but clear. "Nothing," I said, picking up my fishing rod. "Just old trash." Robert smiled. It was a crooked smile, but it was genuine. "Good," he said. "Fish are biting today." I cast my line out. The lure hit the water with a soft plop. Ripples spread out in a perfect circle, expanding, moving away from us. I took a deep breath, my lungs filled with clean air. I felt light. The weight I had been carrying for 40 years, the weight of expectation, the weight of trying to save someone who didn't want to be saved, was gone. I sat there with my friend, watching the water, waiting for the bite. I didn't have a son anymore, but I had my dignity. I had my freedom, and for the first time in my life, I had a future that belonged only to me. "Got one!" Robert yelled, his rod bending. "Reel him in, Robert!" I shouted, leaning over to grab the net. "Reel him in!" We laughed as he fought the fish, two old men acting like kids, and in that laughter I found the answer to everything. Family isn't who you are related to. It is who you sit on the dock with. It is who helps you land the fish. I am Otis King, and I am finally free. We spend our lives building castles for our children, hoping they will shelter us when we are old. But sometimes in their greed, they tear down the stones to build their own prisons. I learned that blind love is dangerous. Respect must be earned even by your own blood. If you raise a child without teaching them the value of struggle, you are not raising an heir, you are raising a parasite. Protect your heart, but protect your dignity first. Because at the end of the day, the only hand you can truly rely on is your own. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It helps me share these stories with more people who might need to hear them. And tell me in the comments, do you think I should have sent Marcus the money? Or did I do the right thing by cutting him off? I read every single comment. Thank you for listening, and until next time, keep your eyes open and your heart guarded.